This conference will now be recorded.
Please note the following. While you're in listening mode, keep yourself muted to eliminate the background distracting noise that we often hear. Each agenda item that we consider that requires a vote will proceed with a motion and a second by a board member, followed first by board member comments and questions, and then second by public comment and questions before a roll call vote is taken. When you wish to speak as a member of the public, please address me as the meeting chair, requesting to comment and announce your name. And please note there is also an open public comment period at the end of the meeting. All right, well, with that said, we're on to our next agenda item, which is our reports for the month of December. And I believe the first one is from our new Chief of Police, Lieutenant Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh.
Chief Carroll.
For the month of December, we have monthly and yearly totals. So for the, we can go over the year or the month, whichever you would prefer.
Let's start with the month and then we'll go to the year, please, Chief.
All right, I have to shuffle my page around a little bit real quick. I apologize, I don't know where I put the monthly total, so I can go off of the, for our accidents, we've responded to 40 accidents, or excuse me, 17 accidents in December, which was down from 40 in November. Our alarms were 64, of which 5 were valid, I believe, and our ambulance calls were 114. I don't have the total calls responded to, but we did travel 17,839 miles, which was down from last month. I'm attributing that to part of the, as a result of COVID and some of the officer injuries we had, we were minimum staff for most of the month. We did highlight our traffic enforcement in the areas of East Market Street, Taylor Mill Road and Goshen Road, Anna Road, Paley Pike and South 5 Points Road, Westchester Pike, Eagle Road, and Green Hill Road. And several of these were areas where we had the higher accident volumes in November. Our training, we didn't train that much in December, but we did complete all of our ERT training. All of our officers were trained, issued the body cameras, and officers Gilbert and Raleigh attended the Glock Armor School. If there's any specific questions any of you have, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, I have
Any
some
board
questions.
members have questions?
Yes, I do. I have some questions, Chief. On the monthly alarm activations that were responded to, there's 6 of them to the Ryan homes between December the 9th and the 26th. Any insight as to what's going on there? Were these false alarms, or did they have any validity to them?
So they were not of the valid alarms, I don't believe. I would attribute some of that to weather, and that with the Ryan homes being the new homes, people going in and out. We had a couple calls up there on weekends when the houses are closed, but people are still trying to look through them.
I guess what I'm trying to drive at is that if this continues on, did they receive a warning, or did they receive a fine? Because to have our police officers have to continue to go out on alarms that don't have any validity puts a strain on our resources here.
Yeah, we have a township ordinance that covers alarms, and everyone receives a warning. After that, they begin receiving fines.
And how many false alarms would they have before they receive a warning, and how many false alarms before they get a fine?
I believe they get 1 false alarm, they get a warning, and then if you get another one in a particular period of time, you get a fine.
Okay, so after 3 false alarms, they get fined.
No, after 1, if their second one is within a certain time period, they get a fine.
Oh, okay. So I would assume then that Ryan Homes has got a fine for all this activity for the month?
They should have. I can check for you tomorrow if the secretaries are here, but yes, that's our policy.
Okay. Next question I have. I know around my neighborhood, the same kind of lawn, quite frankly, over the holidays, a lot of fireworks are going off. And some of this stuff sounded pretty intense, like industrial grade fireworks. Did you get a lot of calls this past month over the holidays because of fireworks? And were there any injuries because of that?
We did not receive any injuries because of fireworks. We did get a lot of calls around the holidays for fireworks, probably more than usual because people stayed home more this year than in years past. And certainly this year is one of the first years when the state has legalized fireworks.
Okay. Next question I have is, we've spoken before individually about a data acquisition of engagements between police officers and civilians. Can you expound on that a little bit more about what does that entail?
So yes, this year we began collecting data on all stops that our officers do with citizens. So that includes traffic stops, pedestrian stops, or any sort of call where they are on their own engage a citizen like a suspicious activity. So now we're recording the people that are stopped and their age, race, sex, and ethnicity.
Okay, and that started in January. Is that correct?
Yes, it officially went online January 1st. I know our officers began doing it before that, trying to get used to it, but it officially began January 1st.
Okay. I have some questions about the year end, so I'll wait for that until you give that report.
Okay.
Do any of the board members have questions for Chief Carroll? I have one for you, Chief. I know we recently implemented the use of body cameras for the patrol officers. Hopefully that's fully implemented now. And I was wondering if you could describe for the board and the public what the policy is of the police department about the specific use, when these body cameras need to be active, when they don't need to be active, how much video footage can be stored at any one time for subsequent use if there was a need to recall information. And if an officer doesn't follow the protocols that you have, are there any consequences for that officer in terms of discipline?
Yes, so all of our uniformed officers, as they work their patrol details or anything in uniform, they'll be wearing a body camera. And they need to activate that body camera with citizen contacts. Almost all citizen contacts, because we kind of don't know what's going to happen in every case. Certainly if an instance appeared to them that would not cause the body camera, we have a list in the policy of when you would activate it. Virtually every contact would meet that list. Perhaps if an elderly person asked you what time it was, you wouldn't need to activate your body camera. But any call you would go on, you would activate the body camera. And you wouldn't turn it off during that call unless there was a need to. And there's outlined reasons in the policy when you can turn it off. But before you would do so, you would announce that on the tape or on the camera, your reasoning for pausing the video. And then, of course, you would turn it back on when that reason was done. All of these are outlined in the policy as that this is what the officers have to do. And certainly there's disciplinary measures for if they violate the policy.
And how much footage or body camera footage can be stored and for how long?
So we are taking in a ton of data. We're still waiting to see how that's going to work out. We have a really big server that came with the system. So our current policy is we store all the video for 180 days. Certainly I can't project at 180 how full the server is going to be, whether we have to address that issue. We'll do it as it gets closer, but right now we store all the video for 180 days.
Great, thanks for your answers.
You're welcome.
Do you have the full year report there, Chief?
I do. So for the year 2020, we responded to 22,735 calls. 174 reportable accidents, 324 non-reportable accidents, 670 alarms, and of that 670 alarms, 49 were considered valid alarms. And we drove a total of 223,736 miles.
Great. Other board questions on the total year numbers?
Yeah, I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, John.
There was a reduction in overtime from 2019 to 2020 by 600 plus hours in 2020. Any reason why, or any insight you can give us as to why there was that reduction?
Yeah, I would think the mass of that reduction is COVID related. Certainly when we got hit by COVID in March, we buckled down for the 2.5 months when we changed our schedule, and we worked virtually no overtime during that period because everybody was working. and we split up the shifts. And since that time, our training, because of COVID, has been very minimal, and training to replace officers when they're in training causes overtime, so we didn't do as much of that this year either.
Okay. Also, there was $1.5 million of value stolen in 2019, according to the report, and that was in 2020. That number went down to $546,000. The number's down by a third, or to a third, from 2019. Any insight as to why there was less theft of valuable items in the township from one year to the next?
So some of that can be misleading. For instance, if you steal mail out of somebody's mailbox, you don't really know what you're getting. You could be getting a check for $1 million, and then there's $1 million theft on the books, or you could get a bunch of coupons that are valueless. So you can't just go by the value when you're talking about thefts over a period of a year. You have to look at specific cases.
Okay, so you're saying that number really, in and of itself, has no meaning as far as an indication of the level of crime within the township?
Yes, I would say it has no meaning. We would have to break up the specific types of thefts and where they're occurring and look at that if you wanted to get more of an idea of what was going on.
Okay. My last question then is both of those two statistics about the reduction in overtime and also, well, the statistic about the drop in the theft, the value of the thefts in the township. How is that compared to neighboring communities, like Westtown, East Goshen, Westchester Borough? Do you have any idea of how we compare to the other neighboring communities?
I could look at their UCR reports for you and get back to you, but I don't know specifically what the township, or I'm sure they're doing their year-end reports right around the same time we are.
I'm just curious. Well, we'll have an opportunity, Ashley and I will be discussing things with you, later on this week. In fact, maybe we can have a chance to revisit that.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. That's what I have.
Chief, one thing I noticed was that the motor vehicle thefts were up in 2020 versus 2019, 13 compared to 2. Was that kind of throughout the year, or was there a particular rash of incidents at a particular season of the year? Any explanation?
Our thefts, I think, even though the value may not indicate it, went up with COVID, with the economy, definitely went up. We're experiencing a lot of minor automobile part thefts right now. And this is something we've experienced before, and it's often related to either the economy or if there's certain spike in drug use in the area.
Do you believe is it mainly local incidents, or is there any belief that there are gangs from outside the area coming and stealing vehicles?
So a lot of our problems when it comes to theft like that do come from outside of our immediate area, but local in that it's within the neighboring or adjacent counties to that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one last question for you, Chief. Do you have any update on our hybrid police interceptors?
We ordered them. They're building them. That's probably around, I think they told us, a 2 to 3 month build period.
Okay.
What'll happen is as they get built, when they get to a certain stage, they'll start notifying us on where they're at, but we have not gotten any notification yet.
All right, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the chief? Is there anyone in the public that has a question for our police chief? All right, then I'd like to move on to our second report, which is from Good Fellowship Ambulance Company for the 2020 year in review and the fourth quarter. Chaz, is that going to be you, or is Kim doing it?
It's going to be both of us, so I'll let Kim go and start there.
Hey, everybody. Chaz is going to just go over the 2020 annual report. We decided just to do 2020 in review, and then I think with Sean's permission, we are going to be presenting quarterly. So in April, we'll glance back at January, February, and March. So if that's agreeable, I'll turn it over to Chaz for the 2020 annual report for Good Fellowship.
Great, thanks.
Yep, I just need to share my screen, Casey, unless you can share. There we go. Share. Hopefully you all can see that all right.
Yes.
Perfect. So this is our 2020 annual operations report. This was sent out to all our municipalities and our stakeholders probably about 2 weeks ago. I'm just going to run through it with you real quick, make sure everybody understands the data that we present here. So for 2020, there were 5,541 calls total. These are all the municipalities that we handle incidents in. So you can see the top municipalities here. We provide primary service to the top 10, with the exception of Downingtown Borough. Newland Township is one of our primary townships, though. So how do we end up in all these townships? Chester County uses a mutual aid system that's based on GPS location. So if their local ambulance is tied up or not available, they're on another call, it'll divert the call to the next closest ambulance. So that's how we ended up on most of these incidents outside of our primary coverage area. You'll see the Delaware County municipalities. Many of those were from, we provided paramedic units to cover Mercy Fitzgerald Hospital EMS. They had a line of duty death early in spring last year due to COVID-19. So we provided units to cover their calls for about 24 hours. So that kind of explains a lot of these Delaware County municipalities there, just to kind of give them some time off and let them handle their line of duty death there. So that's our municipalities. You can see Westchester Borough and West Goshen are essentially our primary consumers. That is where the majority of the call volume is. This year with COVID, this is altered, obviously, with a lot of businesses being closed, not a lot of recreational activities. We obviously saw a reduced call volume, most notably in Westchester Borough. Typically, Westchester Borough has a much higher call volume than this. You can see that pretty much neck and neck there this year. This compares 2020 to 2019. So at the end of the year, we ended just shy of 500 calls less than 2019. It's actually a better spot than we thought we were going to be in with COVID. Early in COVID in the spring, we were down almost 45% in call volume. You know, that kind of changed as we got through the summer, and then most certainly the last 2 or 3 months, we've had extremely high call volume related to COVID, but also, you know, our quote unquote regular calls kind of returned in November, December. So we made up some ground there. So all said and done, 469 calls less than last year. We compare our transports. So these are ambulance calls that resulted in a patient being transported. You can see they were down a little bit higher, 635 calls. This section here just kind of breaks out some volume information here. So our volume by hour, really nothing out of the ordinary there. You know, we have a minimum staffing level that we maintain 24/7. From 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., we have an additional ambulance on duty. And you can see why here. We kind of get that peak around 8 a.m. Then it slowly trends down till midnight. So the days of the week, the only difference we saw really was our weekend call volume. You can see is low. Again, we'll attribute that to COVID. You know, we expect a higher call volume on weekends typically. We just didn't see that over the last 9 or 10 months. Our call sequence are essentially how many calls are going on at the same time. So you can see there were 1,400 times there were 2 calls going on at a time, 442 times that there were 3 calls going out at a time. So we had 3 ambulances on the street taking care of patients. And actually at one point last year, we had all 6 of our ambulances on the street covering calls at the same time. So we staff traditionally up to 3rd call. Anything past that is made up of volunteers. We do have a live-in program here. We have 4 volunteers that live in our building in exchange for volunteering. They're college students at Westchester. So those folks staff those extra ambulances when we have periods of high call volume. So that's how we're able to staff, you know, almost 100 calls more with volunteers, training staff, admin staff. Interfacility transports, so these numbers are not included anywhere else in this report. We do this as well, where we take patients from the hospital back to their home or back to their nursing home. It's just another service we offer to kind of open up capacity in the hospitals as well, especially during COVID, to get patients out of the hospitals and back to their homes. That's just another service we provide. We stopped doing these early on in COVID there. You can see March and April. But then we slowly brought them back through the rest of the year. So how do our calls end up? You know, these are the hospitals we end up transporting to. Obviously, Chester County geographically, always takes the majority of our patients. That just makes the most sense. Followed by Paoli Hospital, Brandywine. You can see some specialty centers here, everything in parentheses. So trauma centers, burn centers. If you don't know, Nemours AI DuPont is a pediatric center. We also use them for pediatric trauma. So you can kind of see we're all over the map really with a lot of these hospitals all over the region, but primarily going to Chester County Hospital. The right side here breaks down the calls that did not result in a transport and why. So the patient refused to go to the hospital. Typically what that is, somebody drives past a car accident, calls 911. We go out there, we assess the patient. They're okay, they don't want to go to the hospital, no problem at all. We call that a patient refusal, where the patient refused to be transported, which is their right. They sign some paperwork, they get a medical evaluation, and they're free to go. So, and then all the other reasons there of why patients did not go to the hospital. Is there any questions on that? Anything I can answer before we go too far?
Well, Chaz, I had one question. It's actually related to something a little earlier, which is you mentioned in November, December, maybe even into January here, you kind of have the back to the baseline level of calls, but now you have the additionality of the COVID calls. Do you have any feel for what % increase COVID is accounting for in terms of the total number of calls you're getting?
Yeah, we actually trend that as best as we can. We trend that based on what our crews report. So if our crews transport somebody that is COVID positive or COVID suspected, they write what we call an exposure report, and it's documenting that they were potentially exposed to a COVID patient. We also use as a data tracking, so we can collect how many patients we're contacting that are suspected COVID or confirmed COVID. Also getting feedback back from the hospitals. They've been really good about letting us know, hey, this patient tested positive for COVID. Percentage-wise, that's minimal. 5% or so, 8% of the total call volume is what we're attributing to COVID. Again, that's what we know though, so there could be more, but it's not a significant number. It's definitely less than 10%. So.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question, if I may. Can you describe the differences between the services provided by Good Fellowship and by Goshen EMS for residents here in the township?
Sure thing. So there's 2 levels of care. There's advanced life support and basic life support. So each EMS agency is licensed at one of those levels. So basic life support is essentially your lower acuity patients. So patients that do not have something life-threatening, a trip and fall, a sprained ankle, a car accident that just need to be checked out. Those patients are treated by emergency medical technicians or EMTs, and that's considered a basic life support call. So Good Fellowship and Goshen Fire Company both provide basic life support. Right down the middle of the township, we use 202 really as the border. So on the Westchester side of 202, the BLS is provided by Good Fellowship. On the other side is provided by Goshen Fire Company. Then there's the advanced life support level, which is a paramedic. Those treat potentially life-threatening or actual life-threatening emergencies. Good Fellowship provides advanced life support to the entire township. So if you're on, the east side of 202, further down Westchester Pike, and you have chest pain or a heart attack, you will get Goshen's ambulance, which is providing the basic life support, and you'll get Good Fellowship's paramedic that'll jump in their ambulance and help take care of the patient. So again, I have a visual of that. If that's helpful, I can kind of show you the township and how that's broken out. Hopefully that was a good explanation for you.
Okay, thanks.
All right. We'll keep going through this. If you want to see the map, I'm happy to share that to you. I don't want to take up too much of your time here. But just a breakout of kind of the age ranges we're seeing. The unique change for this was our 18 to 25 crowd. I think not having students on campus at Westchester University, perhaps the downtown areas being closed for adult beverages, really impacted this number. The 18 to 25 is normally double that. So that was a good thing. It kind of kept that number low this year. So other than that, this is about what we expect for age ranges of the patients we come in contact with. This is just showing which vehicle took which call. We rotate our vehicles monthly to kind of spread out the workload. You can see there's 6 ambulances there. 2 medic units, and then some support vehicles. The support vehicles here, I promise that our supervisor didn't only go on 9 calls last year. What this is showing is they went on 9 calls where they ended up becoming the primary patient care provider on 9 calls, but they go out to many more calls than that, assisting our other paramedics. Some times here, really dispatch to en route, that's our most important. That's what we look at. That's from the time their pager goes off till we have wheels spinning and they're on the way to the call. So that works out to about 1 minute and 23 seconds, the 1.39 there. That's one of the best times in the area. We do really well with that. Anybody that volunteers here or works here can tell you that I harp on that quite often there. We want our ambulances responding as quick as possible, and our folks do a really good job of that. The increase this year was the on-scene time. That's related to them donning their PPE before they make contact with patients. So we did see an increase in their time on scene, which is okay. We have no issues with that at all. We obviously want them to be safe and put on their PPE. We do have 3 stations that we operate out of. They're identified as 55, 155, and 255. One of them is based in East Goshen Township. One of them is in East Bradford Township. And then our main station here on Montgomery Avenue is in West Goshen. So the majority of the calls are handled from our main station. Again, I can show you a visual here when we get through this of kind of how that works. And last but not least, this is just information that other municipalities have asked for, so we kind of include it for everyone. But the total calls on Westchester University's campus, so their campus is covering, or within all 3 of these townships here. The majority are typically in the borough, but you can see West Goshen there does generate some on-campus calls from Westchester University. These calls covering other agencies, we list this here as, you saw the townships on the first page. These are the EMS agencies that we provided mutual aid to. So we sent an ambulance or a paramedic to assist them or cover them because they were tied up on another call. So you can see that's a pretty big number. Obviously, it's down this year because everybody's call volume was down. But this normally hovers around 500 or 600 times a year. So once or twice a day. That we actually provide mutual aid for another service, a neighboring service or somewhere else in the region. Upgrades, downgrades. That's essentially a call that was dispatched a certain way, but we chose, hey, either this patient is having a life-threatening emergency and we upgraded it to ALS and brought the paramedic in, or a paramedic was sent to the call and we decided this patient's not having a life-threatening emergency and they can be treated at the BLS level. So that's just tracking that there. So it is the trend that most calls get downgraded and being treated at the BLS level. And this is just a breakout of the types of calls. There's plenty there to go through, but that's really it. If anybody has any other questions on the report, if not, I can happily show you kind of the West Goshen map and how the breakout works.
Chaz, for someone who is a COVID call, what call type would you typically see that person classified in?
So one of the things we realized early on is that, one of our very first exposures where our providers were exposed to a patient that was COVID positive, the patient had absolutely no symptoms of COVID. It was like a fall or something. It was some other medical emergency, later determined to be a COVID positive patient. So the majority land in this BLS sick person category or this ALS respiratory difficulty, but certainly they fall in a lot of these categories. So it's hard to say that, they're all in one of these buckets because they are kind of spread out, but I would say the majority are in the BLS sick person, which is the top there, or the respiratory difficulty.
Thanks.
Yep. All right, if it's all right, I'll just share a map real quick here. How do I end my share screen?
Before you share your screen, can I just ask you a question, Chaz? It's Robin.
Absolutely. Yep.
One of the items in your call types is related to overdose, and I'm just curious. Unfortunately, I have too many friends who've had children or adult children die from opiate addiction.
Yeah.
At 129, where are we historically in terms of the number of people who are still dying through overdose?
Yeah, I will say we haven't seen that number really decrease. If anything is increased or plateaued year to year. There's definitely not a decrease happening, unfortunately. Part of the problem I would say with this data is that lumps all overdoses in. And with full transparency, we live in a college town. We respond in a college town. So a lot of these are alcohol based, but obviously the number of opiate overdoses, like I said, they're certainly not decreasing, unfortunately. Year over year, I'd have to look specifically, which we'd happily do that, but I would say they're increasing or at least plateauing and staying the same.
Thank you. I appreciate that information.
All right.
Robin, real quick, while Chaz is looking that up, Good Fellowship is a main participant of Project Naloxone. Ethan Healy is actually on this call as well. He's our Project Naloxone coordinator. He actually administers and manages it for the whole entire county for fire, EMS, and police. And Good Fellowship is the carrier of the Narcan. So basically, when anybody on fire, EMS, or police utilize Narcan for an opioid overdose, they fill out a paperwork or a form that we have on our website, and then Ethan replenishes it for them, and he also does all of their training. So Good Fellowship is really the cornerstone in with drug and alcohol, the county health department, and the DA's office on the opioid task force. And Ethan is our representative there, as well as the mayor. Mayor Herron had an opioid task force, Westchester Borough. So he's also on there as well. So if there's any information specifically that you want on the opioid epidemic in Chester County, we can give you Ethan's information. You can contact myself or Chaz as well.
Well, I'm just so pleased to hear about Ethan's involvement. Thank you, Ethan, for doing that. I'm sure you take a lot of pride in doing it. It sounds like Kim and Chaz think pretty highly of you. So thank you.
All right, Chaz, go ahead.
This is just a quick visual. So this is our complete coverage area. Again, we provide primary service to 10 municipalities around the Westchester area. The different colors here you see are, the orange dots are our substations, our main station in West Goshen Township, and then our substations in East Goshen and East Bradford. So during the day, our units respond from all three of these stations. At night, they all respond from the station in West Goshen. So the question earlier, the difference between Good Fellowship and Goshen Fire Company, we look at West Goshen Township. You can see we use essentially 202, Phoenixville Pike is the border. So everything on the west side of West Goshen, Good Fellowship provides total BLS and ALS level care. On the east side, Goshen Fire Company provides BLS care, which is the ambulance. And then Good Fellowship provides the paramedic for any life-threatening or possibly life-threatening calls. So during the day, we keep our paramedic in East Goshen Township, and they respond to East Goshen, West Goshen, and Westtown Townships with Goshen's ambulance. So hopefully that's a little easier visual cue for how the township split up. So any other questions for the report or this map at all? The only other thing we want to mention was vaccines. Obviously, is the hot topic. It's a hot topic in our world for the last 4 or 5 weeks. We wanted a quick shout out to Chester County Hospital. Really early on, initially, Chester County Hospital stood up and said, hold on, we're going to share our dosages with EMS. So within the first couple days of Chester County Hospital vaccinating, our providers were included in that. So many of them have gotten their second dose already. That started last week, getting their second dosages. So all of our providers that want a vaccine have gotten at least their first dose. Many of them have gotten their second dose. So we're in a really good spot with vaccinations, thankfully. I know the health department's working as fast as they can to get the other first responders done, the police community, the fire community. Chester County Hospital is also helping out with them. And then obviously with the changes over the last week in Pennsylvania, our health department is positioning themselves to be able to vaccinate that population as well. So we're in a good spot with vaccinations. We're really happy. Kudos to Chester County Hospital and health department. They're doing a really great job for us. So that's all I had, unless Kim wanted to add in anything else for everyone.
Just real quick to add on to Chester County Hospital, I was on a conference call with them today. They have vaccinated over 300 EMS providers. And they specifically reached out to West Goshen Township Police and Westchester Borough Police. I personally know that the West Goshen police officers, the majority of them, have gotten vaccinated. So again, we cannot thank Chester County Hospital enough being a West Goshen, Westchester Borough resident, they really kicked in and have been really great partners to the healthcare community. So really appreciative of them, and then Chester County Health Department stepping up to be the backup. So it's been really great. They've taken care of their first responders, so we appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Chaz and Kim and Ethan, for a great presentation, and really thank you to everyone at the GFAC team for 2020 and everything you've done for the community. You provide a great service, and your data set is very impressive to walk through like we did tonight, and look forward to hearing from you again after we get through the first quarter. And hopefully we'll be hearing that everybody who wants a vaccination is almost on track to get it by then, but we'll see. Thank you.
Yeah, Sean, before we leave it, I just want to reiterate that. I just want to tell you guys, personally, I appreciate what you do. I know you saved my old man's life literally about 15 years ago when he was experiencing a heart attack, and without your expertise and quick response, he would have passed away at that time. But again, I just want to thank you guys for what you do. You do an incredible essential service for the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's easy to do it when you love what you do, you know? So we appreciate the feedback and look forward to keeping providing a great service for you guys.
Thanks a lot. Casey, is John on the call this evening, do you know, for the building permit report?
No, we stopped that when COVID first started. We can start that up next month if you want.
That's okay. I just saw the information here, so I wondered if he was on the call. Okay.
No.
I think that's it for our reports for the month of December. So we're on to agenda item number 5, Board of Supervisor announcements. Ashley, would you like to start?
Sure. I only have one announcement tonight. I just wanted to let everybody know that a solar ordinance subcommittee, ad hoc committee, has been formed with the help of Derek Davis. It's the members of the Sustainability Advisory Committee and the Planning Committee. And we met on January 13th to basically discuss improvements that can be made to our existing solar ordinances. And we discussed ways that maybe we could encourage or incentivize commercial to go solar, or, you know, developers. So we're just in the beginning of that process, but we'll be meeting again in a few weeks.
Okay, thank you. John Hellman.
Just a couple things. First off, I'm not going to, I know this can be discussed later on in the meeting tonight, but just want to comment about the Ravens Lane Stormwater project, which is getting started off now. I had the opportunity to meet with Dave Woodard yesterday to look over his plans. It's right in my backyard, literally. I can see Sylvan from my bedroom window, so it's close to me. And I know I visited quite a few and seen quite a few of the neighbors. They all seem to be happy with how things are progressing right now. They understand it's going to be very intrusive for the next few months. But when you make an omelet, you're going to have to break some eggs. It's something that's got to be done. Should have been done probably earlier than this, but nevertheless, here we are. Just want to stay on top of it. And I do want to offer to Dave the opportunity to, when we meet some of the folks who are being directly impacted, we have a retirees community group that meets here every month. And I'd like him to, if he can find the time to stop by, just to keep folks informed, you know, as to what's going on and how things are progressing. The second thing is I got a complaint from one of the residents in the township about the Wawa there on High Street and Rose Avenue, and something, you know, some traffic issues there. We're in the process of working through all this with the township staff, so we're in the process of trying to come up with a good resolution to that. So that's all I have.
Thanks, John. Hugh?
Yes, I've been in contact with FAME about the $1 million grant that they got. First of all, it's not assured that they'll get the full $1 million. There's a lot of apparent items that they have to comply with in order to get the full $1 million, and they're not so sure that they're going to get it. But in any event, Mr. Renane is putting together a report to indicate what that effect will be on their total needs. At this point, it looks like it's going to cover a fair amount of it, but not all of it. They'll still have several $100,000 that won't be covered in their expansion project. So I'll stay with it and keep you updated on what their status is.
Thanks, Hugh. Robin?
Hi, I have two announcements. One is that I've been working with staff to review documents that we're going to be preparing for a new performance review process coming up in the next couple weeks to evaluate how we can do a more, I'm going to say, simple process that still provides robust information to the individuals who are supervising employees and employees being able to get response in terms of feedback in terms of their ability to continue to move always through in their new roles and to be successful in them. So that's what I've been doing with the administration for the last couple days. And then on the 27th of January, we'll have the Historical Commission's meeting. I haven't had a chance to step back into that, but I know that they're working on things now that are going to help simplify the ordinance that was initiated it's almost probably about 1.5 years ago now. So we'll start making some progress with respect to that, and probably need to involve our solicitor again if we have any issues related to legal issues, as well as some of the feedback we got from Township residents who were on the list of homes that were considered historical preservation type homes. So we've got a fair amount of work to do there, but I think the commission right now is going through some initial processes to identify how they want to move forward. They're also working with, I think, the Chester County Historical Commission for guidance as well. So 2 things I'm looking forward to doing in the next few weeks.
Okay, thanks, Robin. I only have one announcement to share this evening, and that is that the board met in executive session earlier tonight to discuss a legal matter. So I believe that's it for Board of Supervisors announcements, and agenda item number 6, Casey, Township Managers announcements.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I just have 2 quick announcements. After the board packet was delivered on Friday, we received a request from Liberty Inspection Group to be added to our list of third-party electrical inspectors. The township does not do electrical inspections, and we have homeowners and contractors hire a third party to do all the inspections and the final inspection on the meter, et cetera. I'm seeking board approval tonight. I believe we may have some projects coming up for homeowners who want to use Liberty Inspection Group. So I did not want to hold their work up until the next meeting. The documentation has been reviewed by staff, including myself, and we find it to be in order. So I'm seeking board approval to add Liberty Inspection Group, address of Huntington Valley, PA, as a third-party inspector to be added to our list.
Do I have a motion from the board to add Liberty Inspection Group to our approved list of inspectors for electrical work?
Yes, I can make that motion.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Hugh. Any board questions or comments?
I do have a question about how, do they seek us out or do we seek them out?
Yeah, this is strictly a request from a firm. They typically these requests come in. I mean, dozens of firms out there that do these inspections. We probably have 8 or 9 listed on our website as previously approved by the board. So they typically seek the township out because they have a job coming up inside the township. That's usually how it happens.
Okay.
Is there any review of the status of the approved inspection companies? Is there any reason they shouldn't be on a list anymore over time?
Well, our inspectors work, in our building inspectors work in proximity to all these firms. So they come to us with any issues, but we've not had any issues with any of the listed approved firms.
Okay.
Are there
any?
any?
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to ask, were there any standards that they have to comply in order to be able to be considered?
Yeah, they have to have Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry third-party agency certification, and they have theirs. That's the only one. We don't require any other. We can't require any other certifications from the township.
Okay.
Any other board questions?
Yeah, if staff is, if you guys have done the background work and they're a good company, then I wouldn't oppose adding them.
Okay, is there any public comment? Hearing no public comment, we have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote, starting with Ashley.
Excuse me, Tom. I couldn't find the unmute button.
I'm sorry, is that Margie, you trying to speak?
Delete. Where is Huntington, PA?
It's in Bucks. I think it's in Bucks County.
Okay. It just kind of concerns me that did you say we have maybe 10 electrical?
We have about 8.
About 8?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm just kind of skeptical about, it sounds like the builder or the contractor of a site or a building wants his own personal electrical inspector.
Well, the township does not do electrical inspections on purpose. So they have to hire a third party to do that. I don't understand your question.
Well, it just, I don't know. I want to make sure they're unbiased and, there aren't any favors or shortcuts with inspections.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question, Margie. Are you suggesting they're doing something illegal?
No, but it sounded like the builder or somebody that's building in the township is requesting this addition to the inspector list.
No,
Because
the inspection agency is requesting this to be added to our list.
Okay, can you just mention who
we can't hear you.
Can you just mention who the builder or who the contractor is that requested this?
No, I do not. The inspection company submitted this request to us. I don't know if there are any outstanding building permits with this firm right now anyway.
Okay, I just thought you said you had thought there was somebody that might want to use this company.
That's what the third party agency Liberty had stated. And
yes, typically they don't request this without having a job coming up.
I think the overall point is too that the standards that we currently have in place have been met, and there's no real basis to keep them out based on possible worry about what you were stating. So it's just not about reason at this time.
Okay, I just thought I recall like 2 or 3 years ago we didn't have any, so we went through the process of approving or naming.
No, we've had at least 6 for the past 14 years, and we've added 2 or 3 in the last 5 years.
Okay, that's probably what I'm recalling then. Thank you very much.
So Casey, quick question, just so I can make sure I understand. We have provided a list based upon the analysis that you have made that this is an organization that we feel comfortable making them making them have the ability where they can be reaching out to the residents when they have these electrical issues.
Well,
right?
Typically it's the other way. Homeowners or contractors reach out to them.
Oh, directly? Yeah, because you've got the list.
Correct. They have the list that's in the building permit of the board's approved third-party inspectors.
So it's a tremendous benefit for them to have, 6 to 9 or whatever the number is going to be, so they can vet them themselves.
Correct.
In case there's any concerns that they have.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Sure.
Does the board have that information in front of you that you said you've approved? You just said it's board approved, and I hate for the board to be approving something that they don't have the paperwork in front of them.
The board has the application in front of them.
Okay. That's all I'm checking. Thank you.
Are there any other public questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve Liberty Inspection Group to be added to our list of approved electrical inspectors. Roll call vote starting with Ashley.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Hugh? Hugh?
I think he was muted for
Yeah.
some reason.
Hugh,
Oh, there.
you there now?
Aye. Yeah, somebody muted me. I shouldn't have been, but anyhow, aye.
Thank you. Robin?
Aye.
Sean? Aye. Casey, back to you. Any other announcements?
No, I was going to do a Ravens Lane update, but I'll leave that for Rick. But John kind of went over everything for Ravens. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, next agenda item is Rick, Township Engineer.
I'll start first with the last item, Greystone. Housing construction is progressing through the winter. We do not have a great deal of infrastructure work. The dams and the bridges and all are not really progressing much due to the weather, but housing construction does continue. With regard to stormwater, as Mr. Hellman indicated, the Ravens Lane stormwater replacement project started last Thursday and is now in progress. That work's going to remove and replace approximately 1,300 linear feet of 54-inch corrugated metal pipe that's deteriorated and has failed in a number of places, and will completely replace that pipe. The project's going to probably take a couple of months to do, particularly due to the weather that we're starting with. But as indicated, the property owners seem to be on board with the work that's going to be done and understand the ramifications of having their property torn up a little bit for a while to make these improvements. The Ravens Lane project does emphasize another project that we need to do this year, and that is prioritization of our corrugated metal pipe in the township. We have approximately 30,000 linear feet of corrugated metal pipe in the ground currently. Most of it is about 30 years old, some a little older. The expected lifespan of corrugated metal pipe is 30 to 35 years, and we're starting to experience localized failures in a number of locations, and can certainly expect that to continue in the future if we don't proactively go after aligning and repairing this pipe. So we've received a proposal from an engineering consultant to assist us with evaluating the photographic data that we're getting from the Army Corps of Engineers. We've had a 3-year-long project with the Army Corps to document the condition of our corrugated metal pipe at each of the inlets in our stormwater system. That project is not quite complete. We hope to complete it this year, provided that the Army Corps is able to provide that service to us. They were not able to last year because of COVID, but we are in the process of getting a new agreement with them to finish that work this year. So the project with a consultant is estimated to take approximately 18 months from start to finish to evaluate all of that data and prioritize the replacement or lining of our corrugated metal pipe. Once those priorities are established, then we can work out a process to actually start that construction, hopefully sometime next year. In addition to that, we are, in addition to the Ravens Lane project, working on the design of another stormwater replacement project as well, where we've had a couple of localized failures. So this is going to be an ongoing effort until we can get this issue taken care of. In addition to the corrugated metal pipe issue, we do have to continue to work on our TMDL PRP projects for our MS4 permit. We're almost done design of the 2 basin retrofits for our ME2 grant. So when that construction is done, which will hopefully be this summer, that will give us 2 completed projects. We do need to get at least 2, hopefully 3 projects in design this year to be able to keep on schedule with our 5-year completion of those TMDL PRP projects. We need to complete approximately 2 projects a year for the duration of the permit. And the total cost of those projects is going to be somewhere in the area of $2.4 million. So it's a lot of work and a lot of design work that needs to be done in preparation for that. So we need to keep moving forward with that as well. I think that's all I have. If the board has any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Rick, can I just add one thing before that?
Sure.
So I just wanted to also go back to the corrugated metal, and Rick mentioned a consultant. We were able to get a price and a scope of work from HRG, and I know the board's familiar with them, and they've done a lot of work on stormwater for the township, but as well as sewer. We were hoping the board would be, we don't have an agreement ready for you tonight, but we were hoping the board would be amenable to going with HRG when we're ready to do so. They are most familiar with our township and our stormwater issues, and we prefer to go with them at this point because we think basically if we go out for a full RFP, that 18 months can turn into over 2 years, and we just, at this point, we just don't want to, wait anymore because the corrugated metal issue, CMP pipe is deteriorating quite rapidly on a monthly basis. So that's sort of our position from a staff perspective, but obviously we will need board input on that. Thank you.
So I'll start off with a couple of questions, one for Rick. So just going back to the schedule around the 18 months evaluation by HRG or a professional engineer of the video photo footage that you have to date, is that going to be like a rolling assessment so that you could look at the footage where there is some high likelihood of problems and identify early on what project that might need to start being designed? Or are you planning to kind of let them do all the evaluation and then do a prioritization at the end of their evaluation phase?
I think it's going to be a little bit of both. From prior experience, we have some, I think, reasonably good ideas of where our worst problem areas are, and it would be our intention to start evaluating those areas that we know are issues. We did kind of set that up with the prioritization for doing the photographing of the inlets. We started on the areas that we knew or we thought were the worst. We do, however, need to have some ability to tweak that prioritization as we go, because even though we think we know where most of the issues are, other issues can crop up and do crop up periodically that we may not be aware of. So the prioritization is going to need to be a little flexible as we go along. That certainly doesn't mean that we can't start on some of the known problem areas, even as far as lining and construction, as we complete that prioritization, and tweak things as we go along.
Okay, thanks. And then my question for Derek is, you mentioned that if we were to try to go out with an RFP for this service, the township staff belief is basically that if we didn't go with HRG, anyone else who was brought on board to do the work would have a learning curve, whereas HRG would not, given their prior history of working with the township, and that would be the reason why this 18-month period could extend for several more months beyond that.
Correct.
And that's your logic?
Correct. I mean, the RFP process plus what you sort of just stated is the main reasons.
If I recall right, we approved the estimate of the cost that HRG had provided in our budget decision back in December.
Correct.
Okay. Any other board members have questions?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what kind of learning curves are we talking about? Would it really be a very slow process for a new company to come in and do the same kind of work? And also, I mean, is there even a significant chance that we could save a good chunk of cash by opening it up?
There are a couple of issues involved. One is simply the time involved in issuing an RFP, getting proposals, evaluating the proposals, and shortlisting and going through that whole process. That process generally takes 2 to 3 months at the least to accomplish. The other thing, as Derek has mentioned, is HRG is very familiar with the township and the township's infrastructure, which does allow them to hit the ground running on this rather than trying to have to go through a bunch of data as to where our inlets are and how the township functions and what have you to come up to speed. The other issue is when you look at the scope of work here, the $30,000 price tag for HRG, I think is very reasonable for that scope of work. And I would not expect any significant cost savings result of an RFP. I think it would be time consuming, and if anything, you might save a couple $1,000, but the other could happen as well. Since the other agencies are not as familiar with the township, the prices could actually be higher because they need to have more time to mobilize and get familiar with our infrastructure.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from either the board or the public? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to the next topic, which is zoning officers' announcements. Bill Webb. Hang on a minute, Bill. There's a bit of background noise. Please, could, if you are not.
I just muted the person. I just muted the person.
Thanks, Derek. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you. So the zoning hearing board has a busy, we received 4 applications in the first month of 2021. So I'll go over these applications. I previously had sent everything to the board so that you had the application in front of you prior to this evening, so you could make a decision as to whether you feel as though we wanted to take a position or not. The first application is 01 of 2021, which is an 1154 Westchester Pike. The property is zone C4. That hearing is scheduled for February 10th at 7 p.m. That applicant is seeking a variance from section 84-28 of which is the C4 regulations to use a portion of the property as a hair salon / barbershop. The proposed use will occupy spaces B through D, while space A will remain a daycare facility. There are no parking issues with this property. There are also no other zoning issues with this property, with the exception of the use is not permitted. Now, the gentleman who owns the barbershop / hair salon is actually the owner of the building himself. My recommendation would be that we take no position on that, but again, that is a board decision. So would take a position on application 01 of 2021.
So I'm going to open it up for any board member to speak up now if they have a position that they would like to take on this application.
Yeah, I'm going to speak on that. There's a daycare center there. My kids went there when they were going through Grand Acres and all. My only concern there was the accessibility of the hair salon and traffic and clientele coming in and out of that establishment with the daycare center. But they're on 2 separate sides of the building from what I can see. They're actually separated by fencing as well in the front of the building. So there is physical separation between the daycare center facility and the area which this hair salon would be located. So I feel comfortable with that. My feeling is just to be neutral as far as the board's concerned.
Any other board comments?
Yeah, I would also agree to not take a position.
Bill, was there a business there at some point in the past that was a permitted use?
There was, I'm not sure what it was. I've only ever known the daycare.
Well, there used to be a State Farm office there, and I don't know what else there was. Is this going to be in the lower elevation, do you know, Bill, or is it going to be at the higher elevation?
I believe this is at the lower end of the property.
Okay.
The map should have been provided with the application.
Okay.
But it's the daycare operates in A, and then he's taking the rest B, C, and D, which I believe is the lower portion of the building.
Okay.
And I did bring those concerns up previously, John, with his attorney with regards to separation. And they were also going to take a look and see what else they could do to buffer their clients from the daycare. They did feel as though there was some separation there, but you and I are on the same page about that, and they are going to look and see what else they can do.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Yep.
Well, hearing no position by other board members, Bill, I understand therefore that we're going to be neutral on this with respect to the board.
Very good, thank you. So moving on, the next application is 02 of 2021, which is at 101 North Five Points Road, which is Goshen Manor Apartments, which is zoned R4. That application is going to be heard on February the 4th. The applicant is seeking a variance from 84-57.21 storage sheds to allow for a 12 by 18 storage shed to be placed on their property to store salt and other miscellaneous tools. The ordinance only permits storage sheds to be erected as an accessory structure to a single family dwelling, which is the reason that they're requesting this relief. Again, they fall within the storage shed category by ordinance, so it doesn't fall outside of that as an accessory building itself. So I would feel that we don't really need to take a position on this matter either.
Board comments or questions for Bill? Anyone have a position they believe needs to be taken?
I would kind of agree. The only question I have, I mean, this storage area is going to be meeting all other ordinance requirements, like, for example, setback from property line and so on and so forth. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. They actually exceed what our requirements are for a storage shed. It's well set back, and they're actually placing it where they used to store all of their salt and snow materials outside. So that's they lost a lot of material due to some covers coming off. So they want to put this up to store it inside so their salt doesn't get ruined.
Makes sense.
So is the shed being placed on impervious surface or gravel, or what's the base under it right now?
This is going on an existing impervious surface. It's going to be placed next to their J building. So if you go into Goshen Manor and you go to the left, it's buildings A through J. J is the last building, and it would be adjacent to that building. Residents won't even be able to see it. It sits next to the building. So it is sitting on an existing parking area, but it's not taking up any parking spaces. It's where their dumpsters and such are.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So board members, anyone other than neutral on this application? Okay, Bill, neutral board position for that one.
Very good. So case 03 of 2021 is the same company, different location at 1149 Kingsway, which is Goshen Terrace Apartments. Now that is zone C4, but again, they're seeking relief from 84-57.21 for storage sheds because our ordinance does not allow storage shed on anything but a property that has a single family dwelling on. Again, Goshen Terrace already has 2 sheds, but they needed another one. So it's the same size as the one that they're putting at Goshen Manor, and it's going to be set back and out of sight, out of mind on existing impervious.
Okay, opening it up for any board comments.
I would say take no
I
action.
went,
Yeah, neutral.
yeah,
And it's not the
I
same,
went past.
same as the last conversation we just had.
There you go, Bill. Neutral.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
went
so
past.
finally,
It's a good location.
I'm sorry, Hugh,
All
what
right,
did you
fine.
say?
I said I went past it and it's a good location for it.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
So finally, application 04 of 2021, which is 956 South Matlack Street, the Luxor Apartments, which is owned I2R. That property is also scheduled to be heard on February the 4th. This applicant is seeking three different variances. The first of which is the applicant seeking relief from section 84-52B, parens 1, temporary signs, which allows a sign, that section of the ordinance only allows a temporary sign to be placed for 30 days. And the applicant is seeking that their temporary real estate signs be allowed to be up for 120 days. The applicant's also seeking relief from section 8452U, table 1, which is specifications for signs, which only allows a real estate sign to be no more than 4 square feet. And the applicant is seeking a 288-inch by 44-inch banner signs and a 20-foot by 60-foot building banner sign. This application is pretty similar in nature to the NV Homes application that we heard last year. The applicants, I would also say that we take no position on this application as we did in the application. And then I'll get into the second part of their relief. Do we want to break this up into two sections?
Yeah, let's do that, Bill. So,
all right.
Based on what Bill's just described, does the board have any position on the relief that's been requested?
Well, are we comfortable that the larger sign, I mean, what did they say? How often do they want that sign up? 100 days, was it?
So, Rob, the large sign is actually affixed to the front of the building. It's 20 foot by 60 feet, and it is a building banner. And it basically says Luxor Apartments now leasing. So it's a really large, so people can see it from 202. Because if you don't know the Luxor is there, then you're going to miss it. So that's why that you can see that building banner from Matlack and 202.
Right. So is there a time limit in terms of the number of days that it's up before they then put, I guess, a long-term fixture?
They're looking for 120 days, but they said that they'll have this removed when the building opens, which is going to be in April.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions for Bill? Does any board member have a position on this, or are we comfortable with no position from the board?
I'm comfortable staying neutral on this.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm all right with it, as long as it's going down in April.
Okay, Bill. Hugh, any comments? You good?
I'm good.
Okay, Bill. No
All right,
position
very
from the
good.
board.
So the final bit of relief, the final bit of relief for this application is something that we've heard previously that has been adjusted. The applicant seeking relief from 84-55E, parens 1, parens E, parking relief. The current ordinance states all parking shall meet the following standards, which requires a 9-foot parking space, and the applicant is meeting the parking required by the ordinance. The parking that they are seeking relief from is excess parking for the facility. And they are asking to reduce the excess parking spaces to a width of 8 feet instead of the required 9. This will provide for additional compact vehicle spaces, which at their other locations is a type of vehicle that is driven by their demographic of tenant. Their demographic is millennials who generally don't drive the SUVs or the big pickup trucks. So this relief would provide, under this application, they would provide 115 standard size parking spaces and 44 compact parking spaces for a total of 149 spaces within the garage. Now, the parking ratio for a lifestyle apartment is as follows: one off-street, excuse me, one off-street parking space per studio and one bedroom apartment, 1.5 off-street parking space for each additional 2-bedroom apartment. Now, doing the calculations, they have 40 studio apartments at the Luxor, which will require 40 spaces. They have 146 one-bedroom apartments, which would require 146 spaces. They have 19 two-bedroom apartments, which would require 28.5 parking spaces, but we round that up to 29. So therefore, they do meet the zoning ordinance with their required parking by providing 215 parking spaces is what's required by the ordinance. Now, essentially, they're providing 243 standard size parking spaces. 128 of those are surface parking. 115 of those are garage parking. Now, the applicant, excuse me, I keep getting a muscle spasm in my legs, so that's why I'm getting a little crazy here. I've had conversations with the applicant about this because we had some issues with this in the past. Now, previously, I don't think we had all the facts, and we weren't getting the facts from a previous member of their staff. And now, after getting all the facts from them about, the millennials and that they have complete authority over who parks where, and they manage all of the on-site parking. From a staff level, we discussed it a little bit, and we don't really have an issue with it because they do meet the zoning ordinance for parking. So I did have a further conversation with John Herzog, who's a member of the management team there, as well as their attorney, John Jaros, who's on this call. And I said to them that, from a township perspective, we're really looking at sustainability. And if they're really gearing towards compact vehicles, which are vehicles that are more energy efficient, why don't we offer something that we weren't offering in the past? So we came up with an EV charging station. So as of today, because initially they were going to give one as part of the relief package, but I had a concern and spoke with John this morning that if that one space, that one EV station was being used, then, that really puts somebody else out. So now they're going to provide 2 EV parking, excuse me, EV charging stations as part of this relief if it's granted by the zoning hearing board, which is a win for us, especially from a sustainability level. And I did present this to the sustainability board that Westrom was willing to do this. Now, this won't be limited to Westrom residents. This will be for public use. So it's going to be on the exterior of the building. So anybody who has an electric vehicle can go there and charge their car. So again, in my opinion, this is a win for sustainability. Now, since the applicant has full control over the parking spaces and who goes there, again, in my opinion, I think that we shouldn't take a position on the application. They do meet the zoning ordinance. But again, that is a board decision. And the other thing that I like about this is we're not setting any precedent by saying that we would agree or disagree with this, simply because I think the precedent we're setting is that we're allowing our appropriate boards to make decisions on our behalf that they're in place to do. Because I think in past, we may have just said, let's change the ordinance. Well, that could create problems down the road simply because changing the ordinance, now that is all projects. When you send something to the zoning hearing board, it becomes a case-by-case basis, which I think is a good idea. So again, my position, and I think Rick, Derek, Casey, I think we were all on board with saying that since they met the parking, the minimum parking standards, actually, they exceed the minimum parking standards of the zoning ordinance, and they have control over who uses these compact spaces, and they're willing to provide some EV charging stations that we don't take a position on this application, but again, that is a board decision. So I will yield back.
Thank you, Bill. I'll start off with the first question. I'm sure someone else has more questions too. So just trying to understand from a resident's perspective, the benefit of a smaller parking space. It's really the idea that you will be able to have more parking spaces within the garage, so that you have there's more likelihood as a resident that you would be assigned or have the opportunity to use basically an inside a garage-based parking spot instead of something that's exterior and exposed to the elements. Is that the logic behind it?
I believe so. This is a benefit for the residents of the Luxor.
Do other board members have any questions?
Yeah, they're assigned parking spaces, right, Bill, as I understand it?
That is correct. They are assigned by management and controlled by management.
Yeah, so they'd have a number on the space that they go to, and it's their space, period. So that would control the size of the car. Okay, thanks. I have no position.
Any other questions or positions by board members?
Yeah,
Well,
I can ask a question. Go ahead.
Oh, I just had a couple of comments. First of all, Bill, serious kudos to you for bringing sustainability into this conversation. And thanks to the Luxor and the people at Westrom for being so open to that. In my opinion, I think it's a worthwhile trade-off. And this is the direction that we're going in this township, is moving toward a more sustainable future. You know, talk about setting precedents. I mean, this could set a precedent going forward of how we negotiate with developers, and if, you know, they're willing to offer these kinds of services, I think it's great. And I'm willing to not take a position, but I think that the EV chargers are a wonderful addition. So thank you to everyone involved in those discussions.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a win-win-win. The idea of having those chargers there made available to the public, I think, is a wonderful way to entice other people who are looking at cars and wanting to see a way that they can reduce their global footprint with carbon, to have that just an awareness that they can go there, especially if they have cars where they can have them set up by EV. Good forward thinking.
So just one thought I have on this one is, so the EV charging stations, you describe them, Bill, as being available to the public. If an apartment resident signs up for a lease or is already there and then buys an electric vehicle, are they going to end up ultimately being assigned to the residents versus being available for public use?
To my knowledge, no. Initially, the one was going to be placed inside the garage. But after speaking with the applicant's counsel and Mr. Herzog today, we thought it was in the best interest of the community to place that on the exterior of the building. I guess with regards to whether a resident would be able to charge their car or not, that would be no different than if our stations were being utilized at the township building or at the community park. And I believe, I don't have an electric car, so I'm not up on it, but I think these things work through apps. So I think people would know if someone is using it or not based on the app.
But to your point, Sean, I think maybe if we could get more details on some of the logistical issues from Mr. Herzog, maybe they already have an idea of what they're going to do in that capacity, or maybe they're still trying to figure that out as well.
John is on the call.
John, would you like to say what your position is?
These are not assigned spots, so they will be open. And we do have maintenance and property management team on site. So we will not allow those cars to stay in those spots for extended period of time. So the goal is to charge your car and then relocate it to your assigned spot. So they will be open majority of the time.
Good.
I have some questions here, Bill. I just want to get verification here. Now, this request from Lexar went before the zoning board and was denied. At that time, they were requesting, I believe it was 47 compact spaces. Now they reduced that number down to 44. Is that my understanding correct?
That is correct, Mr. Goldman.
So basically, we talk about 3 less compact spaces here. The zoning board, in their decision-making before, decided that they would not allow this variance in that particular instance. And now the only thing that's different here is a reduction in the number of compact spaces from 47 to 44, so only 3 spaces. After it was denied by the zoning board, the Lexar folks went before the planning commission and requested an amendment to the ordinance to allow a reduction in spaces, width from 9 foot to 8 foot, and there was no appetite at all for that. I felt that it was a very bad move to go in that direction. My position is I don't see this being that much different from what has already been considered before the zoning board and also the planning commission. So my position here would be to not to support this. I appreciate the fact that they are willing to throw in some EV stations here. They went from 1, now to 2. If they would increase that to another 3, then I might be more willing to change my position. But my concern is that we are a developing community here in West Goshen. A lot of development's been going on in the past number of years. We're creating these magnets of congestion, and this is just symptomatic of it, where we end up being in each other's armpits here. And we're creating situations where we're, for just psychologically and physically, we're creating situations where people will tend to go into conflict with one another. And that's what I'm looking to try to avoid. I'm all for development, but I think it needs to be balanced by open space and a realization that we are human beings and we need to have space between us. So my position is not to support this at this time.
John, if I may interject, under the previous application, so there's a reason why they reduced the number of spaces. You can't go back to the zoning hearing board and ask for the exact same thing that you've been, which is why they reduced the number of spaces. I think one of the things, being at the zoning meeting, previously the township took a position to oppose the application. 9 times out of 10, our zoning hearing board listens to what the township has to say. And in this instance, I believe they did. I think that we would have a different result going back, that the township has facts as to why the applicant is doing this, that it is a benefit for the future residents of West Goshen there, and that that the developer is giving something back that is not just for their occupants, but for the general public as a whole. So I think putting those 3 things in, I think that we would have a different outcome from the zoning hearing board. But again, I don't have a vote with them. They are their own body, but just being with them over 6 years, I've seen them side with, a lot of times if we've taken a position on an application, they tend to lean in that direction. Now there has been times where we've not taken a position that we've supported something that they've gone against. But I just think this time it may be a different outcome. It's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, you understand what my position is and why.
Yep. Okay. So I think, listening to the conversation, we may have a couple of differences of opinion amongst the board members. So we probably do need to poll ourselves here around whether we have a position one way or another that's supported by the majority of the board. So I'm open to either Ashley or John if you want to make a proposal one way or the other, and we'll see where the majority of the board lies with either supporting or opposing this particular zoning hearing board application.
Sure, I'm comfortable making a motion, but I do want to take into consideration kind of what Derek brought up about the EV chargers and maybe getting some more information about what those will look like. But I would like to make a motion to move forward and accept this with that condition.
So was the condition answered by Mr. Herzog, though, that he will commit to making these publicly available charging stations and they will not be occupied full-time by a residence?
That is correct.
Did that answer the concern that Derek raised?
Yes.
Can I just throw something in there that you might want, if there is support for not taking an adverse position, that the board can suggest that the zoning hearing board impose that as a condition. And you could send correspondence to the zoning hearing board. Mr. Jaros could ask his client if they would agree to accept that as a condition if the zoning hearing board were to grant the relief.
We would agree to that.
If I may, to Kristen's point, every time I present a case to the board, every time I present the case to the zoning hearing board from the board's perspective, from our perspective, I do present any suggestions or recommendations that we would like to take place. So that would be part of my recommendation from the board's position on this application when I present it, when I present the case at the zoning hearing board.
Right, but I just think that the motion has to reflect that that is the intent of the board.
Yeah. So actually, do you want to modify your motion to include what Kristen has stated?
Yes, I do. Okay, I would like to make a motion that we move forward with this and accept it with the conditions that it first be approved by the zoning hearing board. And go ahead, Kristen.
Ashley, let me try. Yeah, let me try. So your motion would be that the Board of Supervisors not take a position adverse to the applicant's request for zoning relief to reduce the size of 44 parking spaces to 8 feet by, is it 18, Bill, or 20?
18.
18. Provided that the applicant provides 2 public EV charging stations and that they monitor it to make sure that the residents do not continue to park in those EV parking spaces such that they're open for the public to utilize.
That's right.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
Is there a second to the motion?
Yes, I'd like to second the motion.
Thank you, Robin. Any other board comment or questions? Is there any public comment? Okay, hearing none, we're ready to take a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
No.
Hugh?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean? Aye. So motion passes 4-1.
Thank you,
Mr.
everyone.
Hellman opposed. There you go, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. So finally, I guess the bit I have is that we have all the rental annual licenses were due by December 30th. And I had to write 40 citations for individuals who did not send those in. So we will be busy in district court, I believe, within the next month or so. But otherwise, I have nothing further this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bill. Okay. On the agenda is discussion of 2022 to 2025 elected tax collector responsibilities and compensation. So I'm going to start this one. The elected position of tax collector of West Goshen Township will be on the ballot this November. for a 4-year term commencing the first Monday of January 2022. There is a legal requirement that any changes proposed to the elected tax collector duties and compensation must be adopted by the Board of Supervisors prior to February 15th of the year that the election is to occur, and that once adopted, those arrangements stay in force for the term of office. So therefore, we have a responsibility now to consider if there's alternatives to the current arrangement and assess those and determine if we have a different or preferred direction ahead of this 15th of February deadline. Obviously talked about this before, and John Helmer and myself have done a little bit of due diligence on the tax collector role and the different approaches that can be used to fulfill and perform the work. And I'm going to ask John to kind of share some of the things we've learned so far for the board's consideration.
All right, thank you, Sean. First of all, just to let everybody understand what we're dealing with here, this is a Class 2 Township statute that requires us to have the following elected officials. We have to have a minimum of 3 supervisors. You can have up to 5, but you got to have at least 3. You got to have an auditor. You got to have a tax collector. So we have to have those positions elected by the citizens of Township. So it's an elected position responsible for overseeing the real estate taxes collected for the township. Now, we've had a lot of discussion with the staff and also with the current tax collector about what the core tasks are as far as what this job would entail. The printing of the tax bills usually is done in February. They're being sent out in the beginning of March the 1st. The receiving, the documenting, and the depositing of the return checks and all that from the residents is done. Almost 90% of the residents in the township do it by the end of the discount period, which is April the 30th. And then there's also a responsibility of developing monthly reports to the township, which is required also by code and have to be signed off by the tax collector. And also we have to answer any informational questions by the residents. There's also another function done by the tax collector, and that is to respond to requests made by different entities for tax certifications. And right now that's currently being done by the tax collector in its entirety. But all the other former tasks that I just mentioned, the sending out of the tax bills, the documentating of the bills that once they're received, the depositing of them, recording of all that information is done in-house currently by the deputy tax collector, which by code, the tax collector has the right to appoint. We have an in-person, in-staff person now that's performing all of those functions. So I think it's behooving upon us as a board to take a look at what would be adequate compensation for the tax collector going into the next term. Currently, the tax collector is, by resolution, receiving a compensation of $28,000 per year from the township. In addition to that, the tax collector also receives from the tax certifications that he performs $5 fee per tax certification, which goes directly to the tax collector. It does not go through the township at all. So in addition to the $28,000 received by the tax collector from the township, there's anywhere approximately maybe $4,000 or thereabouts received for performing tax certifications, anywhere between 600 to 800 tax certifications per year. So we're looking at that in addition to his compensation. So I think at this point we should take a look at what would be an adequate compensation for the tax collector position if we could move all of the, I'm going to call them logistical secretarial tasks that the tax collector is mandated to do, but have it be done by an in-house tax, staff, which basically is primarily being done now anyway. So I think we should take a hard look at what would be adequate compensation to the tax collector. And we have a resolution here prepared for us by our solicitor for us to consider. And what we would have to do would be to decide what would be adequate compensation for the next term. So I'm going to offer that up for right now for any board members to comment.
Well, just to add, John, to some of what you've stated so far, I mean, some of the things we did was to contact the surrounding municipalities just to understand some of the options that are out there and what other municipalities do. So, for example, West Whiteland Township currently has their tax collection service completely outsourced to Keystone. The total cost to them is $20,000. It's basically a charge per tax parcel that they have to collect against. And they provide all the services that we currently do in-house and also respond to inquiries that the municipality may get from residents. East Goshen has an elected tax collector. They perform all the work with in-house finance staff, and their tax collector is paid a nominal $1 or $10 per year. It serves in more of a perfunctory manner, with the work being done by in-house staff. So there's a couple of examples. Several municipalities also use the county, which offers a service for real estate tax collection. And again, it's a unit charge per parcel that is serviced. So I don't know the exact number, but it's similar to the outsource model, just be a different number.
It's 23 municipalities are being serviced by Chester County Treasurer. They perform all the functions that we do here now, and they charge $1.75 per tax invoice, and 55 cents on top of an invoice that's late.
So having kind of got that information, my position would be that we should consolidate all the work into a single kind of approach. So therefore, the duties would be different than they are today for an elected tax collector, whether that was that work is now moved to an in-house role or whether it would be done in a different manner with an outsourced service. Given where we are with the current capability of staff in-house, and the relatively small incremental amount of extra hours that would be put in there to the staff to perform these certifications, I'm generally leaning towards the idea that that's the direction to go. But I'm open now to hear what the other board members think.
So Sean, just a couple of questions. So are you proposing that we shift the current approach from like kind of dividing it between in-house and an elected tax collector to either or approach, either all with an elected tax collector or all in-house?
Yeah, I was pointing out that there are, you can go with different approaches, but I think with where we are, given that 95% of the work is done in-house, it makes sense just to bring the remaining effort into the responsibilities of staff and the finance team, and to eliminate the high level, the compensation level that's currently provided for the elected role, reduce that to a smaller amount, a more nominal amount.
So Sean, can I just ask this question specifically related to the certifications? What does that process look like, and do we have the staff trained already capable of being able to process those certifications?
I don't know if Christine's on the line tonight, or if Casey or someone else from staff would want to comment on any of that.
Sure, I can start. Only the tax collector and deputy tax collector have access to the separate tax collection software, RBA. So we would have to, obviously we couldn't just rely on one person to have access to that software, so that would have to change. And we'd have to enlarge the roles of those other staff members downstairs to make this change. There's also one other thing, Kristen, you can chime in here. The tax collector, one of his or her duties is to recommend to the Board of Supervisors any tax exonerations that come up once in a while. We've only had a few here since I've been here, but I'm not sure how that would work with a deputy tax collector or the staff making that recommendation. We don't have the authority to do that. I don't think the deputy does either. An exoneration occurs when there's a loss on a property. And let's say a house burns down and the house has been completely demolished and there is taxes owed on the property that goes into the following year. The board can absolve the property owner of those taxes. So I'm not sure how that would work. That's a question for Kristen.
And I think it could just come from a recommendation from the deputy tax collector or the tax collector. I mean, I think there are still some, I don't want to say perfunctory, I don't know if that's the right word, but there are some statutory rules that the elected tax collector still has to do. And so although the board can change the compensation, you can't change what the second class township code says the elected tax collector shall do. And I think it's like turning the tax duplicate in or something like that. There's certain forms that need to be signed by the elected tax collector. And, you know, I know the way that East Goshen does it is that, as Sean mentioned, the elected tax collector is more just a figurehead, because nobody in their right mind is going to run for it if they're getting paid $1, because I think the compensation is $1. Knowing that, you know, if they're really going to have to perform all the duties that your current tax collector is doing, they're not going to continue to do that for $1. If they're going to have to do the actual heavy lifting, then they're going to expect to be paid a compensation that's commensurate with the work they're going to be doing. So there still may be minor, you know, administrative paperwork that has to be actually signed by the elected tax collector. But as far as the exoneration, I think that recommendation, I think it's ultimately the board's decision on whether they do exonerate the tax. So it could just come from a recommendation from your deputy tax collector or your staff, your finance director.
Yeah, there's still a monthly report that has to be done by the tax collector and signed off by that person. So that rule cannot be just eliminated. That's not being suggested here. What's being suggested here is to bring in the remaining of the logistical work required to be done by the tax collector in-house, but the tax collector still has to perform, as you said, Kristen, their elected duties, which includes the signing off on that monthly report to the finance director of the township.
So, Sean, quick question, if I may. I know we're sort of under a deadline for the resolution itself. So if it decides to make a compensation change for the tax collector, excuse me, can we have more of an elongated conversation about whether it goes in-house or totally out of house, or is that sort of something the board wants to decide in conjunction with the resolution being passed, I guess, fairly soon? I guess where I'm coming from that is just having a little bit more thorough conversation with Christine and making sure we're 100% weighing the pros and cons of going to a third party or keeping it in-house, and just making sure all our ducks in a row from a staff perspective.
Yeah, I guess you know, my position tonight is I really, although I articulated the idea that you could have an approach that outsourced it, that's not really what I'm proposing tonight. Since we're already doing the majority of the work, 95% of it, I'm more inclined to look at the East Goshen model of how you bring the last bit in-house, make sure it's, you know, there aren't any issues that could raise. I mean, this doesn't happen, remember, until January of 2022, so it stays as is for this year. We are hiring an additional replacement within the finance team. You know, I'm sure Christine and township leadership management could figure out how that work could be appropriately done. You know, if we need to wait till February to do that and get the final okay or understanding within the internal team, that's fine. But I would like us as a board to, you know, consider that we want to get this resolution complete. You know, as John articulated, there's $32,000 basically out there right now between the compensation, the income that can be had from the tax certifications. There's also the cost of the township contribution for FICA. So there's a savings that can be made here on the assumption that it's a few incremental hours of work into the finance team within the township. So I'm really not proposing that we do any evaluation in terms of whether an outsourced model is a more appropriate way to go, given the resources we already have. So that's my position.
Yeah. And the decision has to be made by February the 15th in order for it to be legal.
Right, so I was gonna mention that if you're gonna defer it tonight, you'd have to do it at your work, if you're having a work session the first Wednesday of the month.
What works remains to be done other than maybe fine tune the resolution, Kristen, with regard to the duties?
No, I'm just saying if you didn't make a decision tonight, you'd have to do it at your work session because your regular board meeting is a day after the deadline.
Okay, understood.
That's what I'm saying.
So I'd like to hear from the other board members if you have support for the direction I described, or whether you are not, you see a different approach being needed.
Well, Sean, I'll speak first. I support it. I think my only concern is to make sure that finance staff are well prepared, which I'm sure you've already had discussions with them about it, just so that we know that transition from the external to the internal is a smooth transition.
Okay. Hugh, do you have any comments?
Not at this point.
Ashley?
I guess along the same lines as what Robin just said, I do support it. I just want to make sure that we've kind of thought this through as much as we can. Casey mentioned that this would be an extra workload for the finance staff. I'm not really sure how much work. I mean, you're saying it's 95% done in-house. So if it really is 5%, it doesn't seem like that much of an extra workload, but yeah, I support it.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. Christine, I see you here. Have you given this any thought as to how you would manage it? Have you any concerns or issues you would like the board to understand?
Well, I will say I did reach out to East Goshen just to sort of do my own due diligence and to try to gain some perspective on how they manage what they do with their real estate taxes in comparison to what we currently do. They do currently handle all of their real estate tax items in-house. For comparison's sake, we definitely have a larger tax volume than East Goshen does. Based on their estimates compared to ours, we send out about 1,200 more bills than East Goshen annually. And that's going to increase, by several hundred as the Woodlands development is completed. So that is a larger volume to consider when you're looking at, the additional letters that are associated with that, the additional resident interactions that are associated with that higher number. Right now, we're really only performing, the quote unquote clerical work in a supporting role. We do mail the bills and receipt the payments, but we right now do not hold any official responsibility for the real estate taxes. That really rests with the tax collector. We're not performing any of the reconciliations or, managing any of the resident issues or penalty waiver requests or anything like that. Let me see what else I had here. There were some things that, I just wanted to raise because I was unsure of how the second class township code reads. I know it was talked about the cert revenue. I don't know if Kristen has clarification on that. The way the code is written, is the township allowed to receive that revenue, or does that have to go to the tax collector since they are elected in that role, if that makes sense?
I think it's part of the compensation decision that the board makes for what the tax collector is entitled to collect.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if there was some legal implications there in regards to that. And I think that was all that I had, for my areas of concern.
Okay. Just one comment on the decision around when a resident makes a payment that's outside of a deadline. So whether it's outside of the discount period or slips past the base payment deadline or even the end of the year, we could have our elected tax collector be the arbitrator of the decision on that. We could have that as part of the duties that remain with the elected official and not ask the township staff, deputy tax collector to be responsible for accepting or not accepting a particular late payment against the deadline.
Yeah, I just tried to go through, what our current processes are and kind of compare them with East Goshen, since that was the model that was being looked at, and that was just one of the differences that came up in that process.
Okay, thank you.
Sean, Sean,
Hugh, go ahead.
Bill Keenan's on the screen. Maybe we should ask him what.
Sure. Thank you, Hugh. So, yeah, hi, Bill. Good to see you. You've obviously heard the conversation this evening. Do you have any comments you'd like to make? Bill, I think you're on mute. We still can't hear Bill. Yeah, I can't hear you, Bill.
No, I can't hear you, Bill.
Got that funny symbol next to his microphone that's neither off or on.
Yeah, I just sent him the audio pin. I'm just trying to diagnose. Looks like he needs to hit the pin number.
Does that mean that he's on a phone calling in?
He's on the phone, he's saying, yeah. I think, Bill, Casey says you need to use the pin if you've dialed in by the phone. So I don't know if he sent it to you.
Yeah, I just sent it and it says audio pin not entered. Send it again.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, here you go.
You can.
You're on.
Thanks. Technology. Good evening, everybody. So, Mr. Walsh, Chairman, we've had a few discussions over the roles and responsibilities of the position here. And yes, when we set it up the way that it is currently set up, there were really important reasons for doing that. And the main one is to, as the township had the ability to collect the cash, it gave them the ability to use the cash flow, $3.7 million, very timely. Whereas when you look at the tax collector's role, how it would normally be set up, the tax collector would collect all the payments, and then there would be like a 30-day lag to get the cash to the township because it would happen the next month. So the reason why we set it up this way when I took over as the tax collector was to give the township the ability to utilize the cash flow immediately. And it was done with the idea that it wasn't really going to cost the township that much. Now, the deputy tax collector, and she's great, she spends about 20% of her time doing this work. I do believe she has other responsibilities. I'm the one that handles all of the resident calls, or the majority of the resident calls, working through the issues. And basically the difference is that the deputy, although she's doing a lot of the processing, all of the issues related around real estate taxes are really handled by me. And yeah, I spend, and when you say there's, the township spending, 95% of the time, the amount of hours, as I had mentioned to you and Mr. Hellman, is that I spend anywhere between 500 and 600 hours a year handling tax certification, handling phone calls, doing the reconciliation, doing the tax liens, all of that stuff. Lot more time during the actual tax busy season, which is February to the end of April. That's where we collect 90% of our tax collections. And then after that, it kind of whittles down to anywhere between 5 and 10 hours a week. But that's sending out letters to, once we get out of the discount period, that's sending out letters to all the unpaid parcels, to the residents, letting them know that their parcel is still unpaid. And basically what you're handling there is more or less residents who may have changed their mortgage companies, and they're thinking that they escrowed their monies with the mortgage company paid it, but because they did a refinance in the middle of that, it becomes a problem where the tax bills don't get paid. So all of those issues come into me, and I have to work through that with the various people, the third parties, to get that information corrected. Just to give a little bit more, light in terms of the roles and the responsibility here of the tax collector. And what I would say to you is that, most of the time, this all happens behind the scenes from the supervisors, and I work well. I believe I work well with the township, but I'll let the township speak for that. When I go out and I talk to other tax collectors, there's always what I would call, they have challenges dealing with their townships. And I've been doing this for over 20 years. And I will tell you that the relationship that we have works seamless here. And I always felt lucky to be working with the supervisors, in the fact that this worked out well, and this happens behind the scenes, and tax flow comes in, and it's to the benefit of the township. And I think, I guess I would throw a question out to the supervisors. Are you hearing anything from the residents that they're unhappy with the service, that the supervisors aren't getting the information, that the township's not getting the information? I'm thinking everything's working pretty well, but I would ask that question, because when we're talking, yes, $28,000 for the service that I'm providing, I think the residents are getting valuable service for that. And I don't think you'd hear, I haven't heard, maybe once or twice, when a resident gets a letter saying that, why did they get this unpaid letter from me? And I have to walk them through the process. But for the most part, I think the residents are really appreciative of what happens in this tax roll.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate you sharing your insights. Do any of the board have questions for Bill? Okay, so
Margie. I'm sorry.
Hang on a minute, Margie. Hang on a minute. So okay. Does the board have any other thoughts, or would like to consider where we are with maybe making a resolution or suggesting a way forward for where we stand at the moment?
Well, yeah, I guess I just have a question about how you want to proceed, John. Are we talking about changing the salary number? And if so, is there any proposals on what that would be?
So, I mean, listening to the conversation tonight, and I certainly appreciate everything Bill has done over the years. And, he's certainly, going back 20 years, he's probably helped put in place some of the good processes we have today, where we get great collection of real estate taxes into the township. My issue really right now is, we've moved on, if you like, and we're at a point where we can probably have a more cost-efficient way to manage our real estate tax collection than the logistical work, as John described it, being done in-house. And with a $32,000 tax collector, when I look around at surrounding municipalities, none of them have that kind of cost structure in their real estate tax collection. So my suggestion would be to move forward to having it done all in-house, keep perhaps some, I'll use the word strategic, if you like, decision-making to be left with the elected tax collector for a compensation that's in the few $100s range, maybe $500 as a suggestion, and to move forward with the work being done by in-house finance staff starting in 2022 with the new elected position. So that's where I am. I'm happy to make that motion, repeat everything I've just said, but that's kind of my thoughts. But I don't want to go in that direction if the board has some alternative suggestions or is not convinced from what they've heard that this is the right approach, or it needs more thought from Christine for another couple of weeks and we need to address it on our February workshop. I'm happy to, hear what you think on that.
This is Christine. I just wanted to make one more comment that I forgot to make previously. I do think that the setup we have right now does offer a level of internal control that allows us to have, a segregation of duties, which I think is important when you're talking about that volume of money that does come in through real estate taxes. So that's just something I wanted to point out also, in the potential transition from what we have right now is really a dual role, really a single role.
Yeah, I agree. That is a primary consideration. You need to have that balance of power there within the tax collecting structure. But essentially right now what we're talking about doing is bringing into reality what is actually occurring, and its primary duties of sending out the bills, accepting the bills, and recording all the information, and developing the reconciliation reports, and all that is basically being done in-house now. We're not going to eliminate the position of tax collector. We can't. By code, that's not something that's even an option. So there still will be an elected tax collector whose duty it will be to oversee and to reconcile in the final analysis, all the numbers that are for the tax collecting function that's being performed here. So I agree, that is a consideration, but that's not going to be abrogated by changing the compensation for the tax collector.
Sean, can I speak as well now?
Who was that? I'm sorry.
It's Robin.
Oh, sorry, Robin. I was looking elsewhere. Go ahead.
That's okay. I'm wondering, Christine, I usually do better when I can actually read information, and in the past you've put together good memos for us to understand certain things that are happening with whatever challenges you guys, especially when we're doing our budgeting. Could you maybe put on paper something that we can absorb to see how this is going to work within the township? If everything is transferred over to your department, I know you probably feel pretty confident with some of the work that's already been done because you have an employee who's been doing that for quite a long period of time. But just thinking about some of the things that Mr. Keena mentioned about the outreach or potentially the intake that would need to be possibly increased in terms of time. I don't know about compensation for whoever would be taking over those roles to actually share that information and explain things to the residents. That's one area that I'm just a little bit concerned about, whether or not we will have, as I said, the correct credentials as well as good training before that person is, being responsible for reaching out to residents, making sure that that you feel confident that that can be handled within the team.
I can try to put something together. I mean, right now what I have is just some notes that I jotted down during my conversation with East Goshen. I don't really have a clear picture right now of what that would look like bringing it in-house because it is additional work. So, some sort of reallocation and redesigning of our department would have to occur. And that's a discussion we have to have, within our department of how we would do that and whose responsibility that would ultimately be and how, we might have to take something from that person that gets these new responsibilities and move them elsewhere. That's not something we have, a solid picture on right now. I could write something up outlining, the differences of what we're currently doing with what the added work would be. But I think, Bill kind of outlined that. And I know, that's something that's been discussed before, but if that's something that the board would like, I can certainly try to put something together.
I mean, so I understand why that would be helpful, Christine. I really do. My only concern is that we only have until February. And so if we don't have to do this at the workshop, then if we don't address this tonight, I am all about saving our taxpayers money and saving the township money. I don't understand where the miscommunication is coming, because Bill's saying he spends 500 hours a year doing this, that, and the other thing. On the other thing, that almost everything is done in-house. So I'm just not sure where that disconnect is happening. I would like to save money, but I don't want to sacrifice service. And I took the same position with our dispatch, I'm all about quality service for our residents. So for me, I'm hearing two different things. It's really difficult for me to right now. And it doesn't seem like we have very much staff support.
Well, we need to provide the level of service that Bill's providing in terms of providing the answers to questions that residents raise with respect to the bills, and the volume of that can ebb and flow depending on what might be happening. We are going to have additional homes coming in, so whether Woodlands is there or not, it's additional work one way or another. I do think perhaps we should give Christine a couple of weeks here just to get a frame up of how she could look at the work being done in-house that's currently being done by Bill, whether that's majority of it being the mortgage certifications, tax certifications that are required, and the responding to residents' questions and issues. So, if she can base a range of hours that would need to be accommodated to do that, and see how it might fit within a finance team structure. And then we could have this final conversation at the February workshop. Seems like that's where we are right now.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Walsh, if I may, I just want to reflect on the customer service aspect for a second. Typically, when we are here during meetings, I see Bill downstairs returning phone calls. That's one component that we may possibly lose, is the nighttime callbacks to our residents. That's what, from my understanding, he primarily does, is all those callback to our residents and business owners at night, so he can speak to them. But
those calls, Casey, being collected during the day by folks on the township staff and then being passed over to Bill to return at night. So it is a double handling in a way. I'm not seeing that as a driver for. They would be answered real time, a lot of them, if it was done in house.
No, I understand that, but there are still a number of residents who can't speak during the day because they're at work or something like that. So he returns those phone calls at night. I don't know how we would even consider offering having a staff member be here at night by themselves to answer those
on the weekend.
at night. So we could only answer them during the day.
Yeah. Well, I did talk with West Whiteland, who have outsourced this to Keystone, and they deal with all resident inquiries. And initially they were getting some pushback when residents realized they were going to be moved over to Keystone to answer the questions. A year or two have gone by, and it's working perfectly well, was her description to me.
Yeah, and it's not to say that the tax collector would not be able to perform some of these functions, especially the problem calls that the in-house folks did not feel comfortable in handling. But for most of the calls that are handled, were probably done during the day, and they're logistical questions about when do I send it, where do I send it, and so on and so forth, which are being handled now by in-house staff.
Well, at this point, we've had a conversation around the board. We've heard from Bill. We've decided that we really would like Christine, if you don't mind, to prepare at least some ideas and put them down on paper relative to how an in-house team could perform the work that we've described, and it includes what Bill currently does. So at this point, I'd just ask for any public comments on the conversation so far.
Hi there, Sean. It's Margie.
Go ahead, Margie.
I thank you for the opportunity. It's my understanding that the reason you need to set a salary is because of the election, of course, in 2022. So whoever is going to run for tax collector needs to know what the salary is going to be, because that might help him or her determine whether they're going to run for office. So there's that point. Just a reminder, we have 3 elected auditors. We always find people to run. They have no responsibility. They don't get paid, maybe one meeting, $15. I was concerned 4 years ago when I saw the tax collector's salary go from, I believe it was $4,000. So for
14 to 28.
Okay, and then what was it before then?
7.
7. So it's slowly climbed up, and I don't know that his responsibilities have changed. But anyway, as you know, I'm a fiscal watchdog. I've also done my research, looked at neighboring municipalities, and I am totally on board with what Sean was suggesting and going to the $500 or $1,000. We pay staff. We have good staff. They're capable. They're good public servants. I've dealt with them. They're always willing to help, and I'm sure the residents would get an outstanding service from our current staff. So I would like to see, as a resident, that salary go down to a very minimal amount. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Margie. Have another resident would like to comment? Chris?
Hey, Sean, how are you?
Good,
how you doing, guys?
We're good.
Good. Congratulations on your chair seat. It's good to see all you guys again. I was curious. This was an issue that I was interested in when I sat there on the board with you guys, but we never got around to it. And I'm curious, as the research that was done, out of all the townships you might have looked at, was there anyone that was receiving $28,000 or more out of all the townships that you did check with? I guess this question goes to John and to you, Sean, and perhaps to Margie also.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
I did not find any that received that. It's not just $28,000. That's just $28,000 from the township. The tax collector also receives a $5 fee for each tax certification that he performs, and the estimate there is approximately $4,000 is received on top of that $28,000. So you're more looking at like $32,000 or more in that vicinity. But no, I did not find any. I did put out an item at the PSAT's discussion website for a response from folks about what they pay their tax collectors. According to the code, the tax collector can receive up to 5% of the tax receipts received by the township. And all those that responded to my inquiry were in rural areas. So it really, I can't, it's just not a good apples to apples comparison. So as far as that went, I did not find any municipality that was paying anything like that. We have to look closer to here to Chester County to see what's being paid by folks close to us. And, you know, probably the best example is East Goshen.
Right. And I guess then a follow-up question is, I heard about the mail, the postage, the processing and the forming of the letters, and who pays for all that? Isn't that the township that does that?
Casey? The township, the mailing of the letters is all done on township cost, right?
That's out of our expense account, correct? Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Chris, just a couple of data points I have actually were, you know, in addition to John's, which was around what compensation is paid to tax collectors that perform some portion of the duties. The two data points in a couple of surrounding municipalities here that actually have this outsourced. One is with Keystone Collections with West Whiteland, and they have over 10,000 residential parcels for tax collection, and their cost with Keystone is about $20,000. So that's really a combination of what Bill does plus the in-house work that's done. So they're doing the whole soup to nuts in terms of the effort to collect taxes, including answering residents' inquiries. And then, of course, the county offers this service, and John got a couple of numbers on that are in the same kind of ballpark. It's a dollar amount per real estate parcel. So the outsourced, the county level support is both for the number of tax parcels we have would be less than what we pay our tax collector.
Yeah, they charge $1.
I did talk with I remember having a conversation with the treasurer about that, and to your point, Sean, I remember that. Well, I want to end my comments just by saying that I do support your proposal, Sean. I think it's a good proposal. When you look at comparison of all of our neighbors around us, I just don't think it's justifiable not to look into something like this for the taxpayer. So thank you and John.
Thank you for your comments, Chris. Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
I have a public comment. My name is Andrew Husband, West Goshen resident. I'm concerned that if we wait a few more weeks until the public meeting, it's going to make it extremely difficult for anybody running for the tax collector position to be able to make a decision about running. They really need to be organizing their campaign right now, and they need to know what they're running for and what their responsibilities are. If this position, in fact, does require 500 to 600 hours of work a year, I would ask Mr. Keenan to please document that and share that with West Goshen residents. Short of that, I would ask that you guys make a decision tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Andrew. Are there any other public comments or any other board considerations based on what we've heard?
Sean, this is Doug. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Doug.
Oh, sorry, I had to call back in. Yes, I know that the issue with the tax collector salary has been there. Back in 2013, the decision was made to go from 14 to 28. It could have been to put that salary more in line with other townships or with what Bill was doing. However, I would support the idea of finding some savings here but still having the service that Bill would give us and finding that balance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doug. So the last suggestion I had was that we asked Christine to give it a little bit of thought and prepare a memo for the board as to how these duties would be performed entirely by in-house finance staff, with perhaps a couple of these decisions that needed to be made by the elected role continue with them, and that we would therefore revisit this at the February workshop. With all due respect to Mr. Husband's comment about needing a timely decision. So that's where we are right now, unless any of the members of the board would prefer to drive for action tonight. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for your input and comments on that. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 10 is discussion of potential Quality Inn redevelopment at 943 South High Street.
Mr. Colagreco, who would you like to have present their screen? Mr. Tarantini or Mr. Goldthorpe?
Mr. Tarantini.
Very good. Just give me a second.
While you're getting this set up, Casey, I can give the board, just a brief. I know your meeting agenda is running long, so we won't take a lot of time here. But my name's Lou Colagreco, and Happy New Year, everybody. We wanted to take an agenda spot here tonight just to explain to you a proposal or an idea that's come up for the redevelopment of the Quality Inn property, which has fallen on some interesting times over the past few years. The property is presently Zone C3. It's been a hotel since the early 70s. We all are aware of what's going on industry-wide with the hotel market. And I'm not so sure that this site is going to rebound post-COVID. Suffice it to say, the current zoning on the property almost relegates it to remaining a hotel as it is, because the alternative uses are not attractive any longer in the development community. The site is zoned for retail sales, and bricks and mortar retail is not going to happen anytime soon. I think the board is all too familiar with that. It's also zoned for laboratory use, a use which I personally haven't gotten development approvals for in 36 years. I don't see that trend changing markedly overnight. And for office use, and the office market is probably as dormant and even more dormant post-COVID than the retail market. So you have a property that's got a hotel on it, a troubled hotel, which is destined to remain a troubled hotel unless alternative uses are brought to the fore. And that's what my client wants to discuss with the board this evening. I represent Branchport Capital, and Sam Tarantini will run through a brief presentation as to what we would propose on the property and the pros and cons. But I just wanted to give you some background of what the current zoning is and why we think an alternative. It's being used essentially, if you want to count a hotel as a residential use, and in many respects it is, it's a transient residential use. We would propose a more permanent residential use. So Sam, recognizing the time constraints, why don't you briefly go through this presentation, and then we can talk a little bit more.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. As Lou described, you're aware of the location which we're highlighting here. Here are some current pictures of the property and some examples of what we would propose. Very similar to existing properties such as Chestnut Square or the Point. And the overlay of the proposed apartment building would be very close to the existing, on top of the existing structures or footprints of the existing structure on the property. The parking would be underneath the building, about 72 spaces. The rest would be utilizing the existing parking lot spaces with some reconfiguration. And first and second, third, fourth floors are those examples that I just showed you. We can certainly provide those to you if you'd like to see them in print. We looked at the ordinance 3-2018 as lifestyle apartments, and we would comply with those design parameters and bulk requirements, and in providing 290 apartments, of which would be 24 studio units, 86 one-bedroom units, and 88 two-bedroom units. We looked at some basic data at this point in terms of traffic. Given the facility is a banquet plus restaurant and bar, and looked at the current allowed traffic trips from there, and we don't see and I can certainly, Matt Hammond can speak to this if there's questions, but it's not a significant increase in traffic. The proposed use would certainly create a positive fiscal impact in terms of additional tax revenues from real estate taxes. Beyond that, as Lou said, we feel that this would rejuvenate this corner of the township and the property that's there, bringing in more permanent residents and practically addressing hotel operations that certainly will continue to struggle for years to come, given the current circumstances from COVID and the economy. That just gives. I tried to keep it brief, as Lou said. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
One of the advantages, I mean, as we go through this benefits to the community chart, again, you know, the reason we focused on this use is because, one, it's a redevelopment property. As Sam just said, we didn't want to get into the site plan tonight or any of those details. That's not what this is about. This is a policy decision that we wanted to discuss with the township. There's plenty of time to discuss, you know, site development details. We wouldn't be proposing any new zoning text. It would simply be a map change using your existing apartment zoning that you've already approved. But the benefit here is it doesn't take a wild imagination. We're not proposing greenfield development. We're proposing recycling, redevelopment the site with largely the same development footprint, largely the same building layout. So it's something that for all intents and purposes, the township already knows how the site will lay out. Access points would remain the same. We've already had preliminary discussions with PennDOT about traffic. So we've done our homework, but before we spend a whole lot of time, effort, and additional money on this, we simply wanted to float the idea because it is an undertaking, it is an endeavor, and it does require a lot of capital expenditure on our part, you know, to pursue the plan. And, you know, so we also, you know, we are aware of the sustainability drive of the township. Many of the demolition materials will be recycled, reutilized on site with the redevelopment of the property. There has been some conversation with abutting property owners who have expressed their desire to see this reuse of the property, this change in use of the property. I cannot speak to what's happened to the current use, although I've heard anecdotally that it's not good. So we feel that there's maybe a confluence of timing and events here that might work to everyone's advantage. But again, we can answer questions and we certainly welcome your input.
Thank you, Mr. Colagreco. Board members, questions for Lou or Sam?
Well, I'd like to ask a question. Go ahead, Joe.
I had a question. Is it going to be fully sprinklered?
It would be, yes.
Thank you.
John.
Yeah, I have a question. You maintain that the what could end up being here possibly, if the board agrees with this zoning change with this apartment complex. First of all, how many units do you anticipate being built here with this proposal?
The current proposal is 290 dwelling units. I think Sam has a breakdown of one bedroom studio. He just gave it. I wasn't paying full attention to that. I apologize, Sam, but there is a breakdown.
So we're looking at 290 units there that will be, hopefully fully occupied. And yet still you maintain that it's going to be only a minimum or a minimal traffic impact compared to the use that it has right now as a hotel, which isn't being used very much. So I don't quite understand. There's a disconnect in my mind between the number of people who will be living possibly there and what this use is for now and how much traffic that generates. That particular part of our township is a very congested traffic area, especially in the evenings. And in that corner right there where the spur 202 goes off and 322 High Street goes up in the Westchester borough, has always been problematic. It's always been a real headache as far as traffic goes. And I would think that this apartment complex that's being considered here would add tremendously to that.
Well, I can let, we did have our traffic consultant, Matt Hammond, take a look at that. And I would just say this, John, to your point, obviously, if you measure traffic generation against a dilapidated site, I'm operating under the assumption that the township sees no benefit in this site remaining in its dormant capacity. When that site was operational, as Matt will testify, it actually generated more traffic than the proposed apartment use. It's a very large banquet facility. It has an active bar. It has probably 180 guest rooms right now. So if the measurement is against a dilapidated site, you're right, we lose. We generate more traffic because we have a thriving site. But Matt has had some conversations with PennDOT on the bigger issue, which is the traffic conundrum that we all know exists out there. Matt, why don't you speak to that briefly?
Sure, and good evening, everyone. And Mr. Hellman, we have, as Lewis mentioned, we have had numerous conversations with PennDOT, being that 202 is a state roadway, and kind of wanted to ferret out some of the issues that I'm well aware of. I grew up in West Goshen Township. I work in West Goshen Township, and I live in West Bradford Township right now. So I'm fully aware of the congestion and the issues that exist on that stretch of 202 as you approach the spur. So with that experience, we were able to have some conversations with PennDOT and kind of talk about the redevelopment of the hotel into what's being proposed this evening. It is, I would also agree with Lou that, obviously, if you're looking at the current operation of that facility, which I think everyone would agree is less than desirable and is not at its full utilization, then yes, the apartments are going to generate significantly more traffic than exists there today. But again, if this hotel were to be quote unquote cleaned up and a Spring Hill Suites came in, utilized the banquet facilities and the rooms, then you would expect to see significantly more traffic in and out of that facility. And that would be something that, I'm not an attorney, but would be by right and could occur basically with a building permit. So with that said, we looked at the fact that there is really only one access to the state roadway, to the main roadway to and from this facility, and that exists at Stanton Avenue, or Stanton Road, that is, right at 202, and that access allows a right in, right out, and left in. There's no lefts out there by virtue of the median on 202. I also know that during the PM peak hours, when you're traveling north on 202 and you're merging on the 202 spur, that traffic does back up past Oakbourne Road, down towards the middle school. The name of the intersection is escaping right now. Anyway, so we know there's some challenges and why we reached out to PennDOT when we did. There's no magic bullet. There's nothing that I'm going to come here and say tonight or likely say in the future that says if we do A, B, and C, then all the problems are solved. However, I think this project provides an opportunity for all of us to work together to come up with some ideas, which I've kind of already floated by PennDOT and some of the township staff, that maybe working together, we could find a solution that's a win-win-win, or win for PennDOT, win for the township, and win for the developer, that would help to progress some of the alternatives or some of the improvements that have been discussed for many years along this stretch of 202. Again, that would be to the benefit of everyone.
Yeah, I mean, look, Matt raises a good point. The site is not going to be redeveloped as a retail site. It's not going to be redeveloped as an office site. If someone were to come in tomorrow, a Springfield Suites or another hotel operator, operate it, reopen the banquet facilities and move it forward that way, it would generate the same level of traffic that the hotel did back when it was thriving, back in the 80s and 90s. The apartments would generate less traffic than that, but we didn't want this to be a discussion solely on traffic. We wanted it to be a discussion on what's the future use, or what does the township see as a possible redevelopment scenario for that property. We've presented this option, and frankly, I don't know what other options would spur redevelopment of the property, but so that's the dialogue we've been having. If the decision is to leave it the way it is and wait and see what happens, that's obviously the township's decision. But we think we can make a better use of the property. We can clean it up, and we can solve some of the problems that we've heard articulated from residents who live in the vicinity.
What are some of those problems that you've heard from residents in the vicinity?
Crime, drugs, utilization of the facility. As I've been told by staff that it's the police have made more than their fair share of visits to the facility over the past few years in increasing numbers.
I mean, that's a pretty good segue, because I wanted to see if the chief could briefly kind of touch on this, because obviously traffic is a central issue for this development, and rightfully so. But I do think, regardless of if we go forward here or if not, I think we need to get on record what we're talking about as far as how the crime is looking in that property, chief, because I do think it's me, just not being a law enforcement, it seems to be an increasingly bad issue there. So I don't know if you could just briefly touch on that.
It is attracting much more of our attention, much more of our time in the past couple of years. We're down there a lot. Certainly there much more than we would be at a place like the Edge or the comparable sites he was talking about.
Is there any possibility of getting an egress onto the bypass?
So good question. Unfortunately, there are two factors working against us. One is the grade differential between the site and the bypass itself. And then two is the fact that that stretch of the bypass is what's classified as limited access right-of-way. What limited access right-of-way means is essentially access is limited. There has to be a public benefit as to why PennDOT or the federal government would consider lifting or breaking the limited access right-of-way. But typically, when you have a limited access right-of-way roadway, the likelihood of you being able to break it to provide for an access is zero.
Matt, I heard you describe a win-win-win with respect to the traffic, and I'm really trying to get my mind around how there's anything that can be done there, because I spent, I'll be honest here, 20 years commuting home, up, getting on the bypass, and every night when someone was going to turn onto Stanton Avenue and all those cars were piling in behind that car turning, you're wondering how soon am I going to get rear-ended? It's just right. And it just is a nightmare. So my question really is, isn't there a redevelopment of this site that is residential but isn't a 290 apartment complex building? Isn't there something that could be economically viable that is a much smaller residential development than an apartment building there?
So I can't answer the economically viable question. That's outside of my expertise. But what I can say, just to be clear on the win-win-win, as some of you may or may not be familiar with, I believe there was a study done in the recent past by the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. I don't know if anybody's seen that or read that or heard about that, but there was a study that was commissioned that was done for this area of 202, let's say from Matlack Street south down towards 926. And what that, and I believe it was what, section, DVRPC study, section 100, maybe it was. Regardless, that study looked at some of the issues that exist out there. A lot of them were safety related. And Mr. Walsh, exactly what you said, there's multiple accesses along 202, someone turning into the Westtown Township building, someone turning into Stanton Avenue, Oakbourne Road, whatever it may be. And the volume of traffic that exists and the people that are merging or going off onto 202 on the bypass versus going back down into the borough. So there are a number of alternatives that were looked at in terms of what can be done, because the biggest issue is really when you're coming south on 202, the issue is going past Matlack Street and then both lanes merging into one and then coming down again and diverging into the two, and vice versa. It's everyone coming up 202 and merging onto the bypass. So there's a number of alternatives that were looked at to how to alleviate some of those issues. Some of those are easier than others. Some of those are more costly than others. But there was one particular improvement identified in that DVRPC study, which was what I'll refer to as alternative one. And what alternative one was to widen the ramps, to provide for 2 ramps as you're traveling northbound on 202. Instead of everyone getting into the outermost lane and having to make that right to get on the bypass, you would widen the bypass to provide for 2 lanes. So essentially, when you're coming up northbound 202, both lanes converge onto the bypass. Therefore, you get a lot more traffic that's able to do that. You increase gaps in traffic on 202. You provide for that additional capacity. In addition to that, there are other safety type improvements, what I'll refer to as low-hanging fruit, that were identified for this particular section of 202. Some of those are really...
Matt, rather than get into the extra detail on that, okay, there's some ideas out there. Can we just answer the other part of my question, maybe Lou, around, is there any other redevelopment of this parcel that is residential in nature but doesn't involve the size and scale that you've presented tonight?
Sean, I'll be candid with you. I don't think so, given the marketplace, because you have to look at what the fella who owns the property has now. He has a fairly large, I mean, by suburban standards, he's got himself a fairly large hotel. He's got a liquor license, and he's got banquet facilities that could probably seat over 1,000 people when they're all used. And there's probably somebody in the marketplace that would take that in a turnkey operation and offer him more than, what the difference between 290 units and if you're talking about, to be feasible as a modern apartment house, you have to have at least 250 units. I think you've probably heard that before, to provide the amenities that these rents would demand. So I think that he would probably, if I were he, I would just sit on it and I would wait for that next hotel, that next user, that next operator, that next banquet facility to come along. The folks from Branchport are on, they've had more market experience and maybe they can elaborate on that. They've had conversations with the current owner, but I think that probably to get him where he thinks it's viable for him to give up the asset that he has, that's a lot of land. And it probably, since it can't be anything else, since the market really doesn't want anything else there, it's probably destined to be some sort of massive banquet facility, which he could do with a building permit. The use is permitted. He wouldn't need any other approvals from the township. But Ben Goldthorpe, maybe you can speak to that. You know the marketplace. You've spoken with the fellow.
Sure. Yeah, Mr. Walsh. Yeah, I think I can answer the question. So, one of the things we look at anytime we look at a piece of property is what's the highest and best use. And we go through a number of iterations of different plans. And so one of the things we also look at is what is a property zoned and what's allowed by right. And so we start there and we do some sketches and some math on what's allowed. And so in this case, you could either use the current use, or you could put some kind of, I'll call it a last mile warehouse type use. And the math for that doesn't necessarily make sense. You wouldn't lose the hotel in favor of that. And so I think your question is, could we look at something like perhaps townhouses, I think is what I'm hearing you say. And, the answer is we don't have enough land to make that math work. So for example, a dense townhouse community, ones that I've worked on, might be 10 units per acre. And so in this case, we have roughly 8 or 9 acres of available use. And so you're talking about 80 or 90 townhouses. And that just doesn't make the math work. You would still say that the asset as it is performing today is the highest and best use. We look at what the hotel is producing on an income basis today and work backwards from a cap rate. And so in doing that analysis, it doesn't really make sense to change it unless you were up closer to perhaps 150 townhouses, which then just practically doesn't fit on the site. So then we started to look at the apartments, which does work from a math perspective.
Thank you, Ben. So I'm very conscious of the time and how much we've been talking about this subject tonight. Just polling the board, is there an appetite for further questions and answers at this point?
Well, just let me ask one quick question to Lou or Ben or Matthew. Has there been any contact with any residents about going along with this idea? about doing the demo and building all this apartment complex?
Yes.
Sam? Who can answer that? Who can answer that on our team?
Sam's had the conversation, so it's probably best for him.
So
Yeah, there's one that we've had contact with. She lives to the rear of the property where the emergency entrance is. And she expressed support for the change of use. Other residents, we have not talked to a lot of residents, but we can certainly do that.
John, one thing to keep in mind is a lot of the residents that live in proximity to there are going to be in Westtown Township. Not that that's not a consideration. That's just a technical thing I wanted to point out.
Well, the street right behind this complex is South Walnut Street, and that's all in West Goshen.
Sure, yeah, I know, but I'm just saying there's a lot of proximity to Westtown Township too, as far as residential.
Sure.
If I may add to Sam's point about the resident at the emergency access, I had conversations with her last year regarding the vagrants that were walking from the hotel property up and down through their neighborhood. And she had requested whether she could put a fence to keep these people at her expense on the hotel's property to keep these people from coming into her neighborhood.
Yeah, look, I don't think that there's any question in is not very quality. I think that it needs to go. I would love to see it go. I think that the residents living around there would love to see it go. I don't know if you gentlemen were on the call earlier when the Westrum group, with the Luxor apartment presenting.
Yeah.
Okay. So when they first came to the township, they were presenting this big, apartment units and it was approved and they moved forward, but they also promised to improve the intersection and they were going to give something back to the township. Great. And now they came along asking for something and they've given us 2 EV chargers. Obviously, I have a lot of concerns about the traffic at that area. I remember I had a friend that lived in that neighborhood and making that left on 202 is just ridiculous. It's a problem area. Now, I understand that this is only zoned for a few uses, but there are some things that I think that we should consider on that we would like to see, including, but not limited to, affordable housing options. We have a lot of different demographics in this township, and we have a lot of luxury style apartments going in. Maybe we could deal to allocate some small portion of what you're considering building to make more affordable for the residents who can't afford it. The other thing being some help improving that intersection. I don't know how that to the bypass would look, if it would function very well. I guess traffic studies could be done to, determine that. But anything that you could do, that's what we'd be looking for. And the third thing really is sustainability. We can beat this horse to death, but the truth is that is the direction that West Goshen Township's moving in. We are no longer a board that's going to just approve these, or at least I'm not a board member that's going to just throw my support behind, that's not going to give back to our community. So while I always look forward to having new residents move in, we need to get some things out of this. So what I'm asking for is affordable housing, either solar ready so that you can install on the tops of these units, EV charging stations, and traffic improvements. And I think that from me is where I'm coming from with this. But I appreciate the proposal. I think it could be absolutely stunningly beautiful. I would love the reduction in crime. That's a huge one for those residents that live there. So I'm definitely willing to have conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Any other board members? Because I would like to just hear if there's any public comments on what they've heard tonight. Is there any member of the public that would like to make a statement?
Yeah, Sean, this is Doug. Sean, is that Days Inn completely closed and non-operational at the present time?
Quality Inn, Doug?
Oh, it's a Quality Inn. Is it completely closed right now?
No, it's on operation.
It's still in operation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And the proposal, how are they going to need a height variance? I didn't hear how high it's going to be, the proposal.
Well, if we use the existing apartment zoning, it has a maximum height of 60 feet.
Oh, 60. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it would fit pretty nicely in with what you see out there now. I don't think from a land development perspective, you're going to see a whole lot of change in the footprint or the building height or any of that stuff. But look, we understand you got a busy agenda. We didn't come to monopolize it. We know you want to move on. We just wanted to float the idea. And, you know, if you get back to Casey, if you want us to come to another, you know, your work session and elaborate with more questions, we can do that. I don't want to take any more time, Sean. I appreciate the time you've given us. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou.
Thanks very much.
Thanks
Thank
so
you
much.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So, having once again abysmally failed to keep us on track with our agenda and the time, I'm looking at what we have left to cover, and I'm open to the board telling me what they believe they'd like to cover tonight and what can be postponed to another day.
Item 12.
Can I just, Sean? Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think it'd be helpful for us to go forward with a discussion about the sign ordinance. I think that's something that we are trying to address, at least from my perspective, because we will be having a primary in May and another election in the fall. And I think if we can have a discussion now and then move forward once we've had that discussion and we all have some kind of level of agreement, would be valuable to do so. I don't know what else we're putting on our agendas for the next few months, but I think it's important that we have that conversation.
Okay.
No, I agree with that. And I think it's pretty straightforward too.
Let's tackle that, and then we'll see where we are and what else we need to do. I know we need to approve some bills, but let's talk about the sign ordinance. So, Casey, Kristen.
Sure, I'll jump in. So this came about as a result of concerns about the size of political signs within the right of way. I took a look at the ordinance that had been adopted, and it actually had been drafted by your solicitor in 2018. It was adopted in January of 2019. The concern about it is that based on the First Amendment and Supreme Court cases interpreting First Amendment protections on sign regulations, your sign regulations have to be content neutral. So you really can't define a sign or regulate a sign based on the message that the sign conveys. And the way that your ordinance had been, the way it currently is, defining a political sign and having size limitations and locational restrictions based on the fact that it's a political sign really does run afoul of the First Amendment. There's other provisions of your sign regulations that regulate based on content. That's not unusual. I'd say the majority of municipalities have not done the exercise of going back and really revising their ordinances to be completely content neutral. It's not an easy exercise to do. So what I tried to do at the direction of staff was just sort of take, I don't want to say a middle of the road approach, but just basically tackle the issue that was before you. And that is to delete the definition of political signs that was adopted at the beginning of 2019, treat a political sign as a temporary sign and not require a permit for a temporary sign, and specifically address political signs in the township right of way as far as being the size and having them more in line with the size I think that the board is comfortable with, which is not exceeding 3 square feet. Having a duration for they may be posted in public view, may not be posted, excuse me, in public view any earlier than the date that's 45 days prior to the date of the election, and then removed within 15 days after the election. So this is really not full scale going into your entire zoning regulations on signs and making them 100% content neutral, really just tackling the issue of political signs and the size of signs within the township right away that you were concerned about.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make
Board questions?
Yes. One of the things I noticed, Ms. Camp, when I was going through it is you had a limitation of 30 days, and yet the you had the 45 and 15, so that's 60 days. Should that be looked at?
Well, the general rule for temporary signs is 30 days, but then there's a more specific standard to allow a political sign to be up 45 days prior to the election and 15 days after. Those are numbers that are somewhat arbitrary. If you want to make it be 30 and 30, that's fine too.
Well, the question was, is one in conflict with the other?
I don't think they're necessarily in conflict because there's a interpretation rule, a rule of statutory interpretation that if there's a more specific standard, that's the standard that would govern. So the more specific standard relating to the political signs is what would control.
We currently just
Okay,
to say
just so we don't get in trouble.
Thanks, you.
Lou, if I may,
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm sorry. Our current ordinance allows political signs to be up for 45 days. So I think we just that text as it was to keep it, copacetic with how people do political campaigns.
Right. Yeah, and also
Okay.
the temporary provision here, Kristen, is that has to not necessarily have to do with the political signs, right? I mean, in other words, political signs is not in the section where we're considering temporary. Is that a correct understanding of what you're presenting here?
I mean, there's a couple different things. The ordinance number 1 eliminates the definition that you adopted.
Right.
Political sign. It then adopts a new definition for temporary sign.
Right.
It exempts temporary signs and political signs from having to get a permit. And then it has specific regulation to say that the size of political sign shall not exceed 3 square feet and the duration of the time limit.
Right. I understood. I just want to clarify what you had brought up. Do we have to have the number of days under the temporary sign coincide with the number of days that allowed for the political signs in the new section 52Q?
No, you can make those be whatever date, whatever time frame you want.
Right, because the political signs is taken out of the temporary signage section. Is that correct?
I have to go back and look at that section.
Okay, well, all right. While you're doing it, also a couple other questions. My next question is, this resolution, as you have it presented to us for the board, is this, in your opinion, an enforceable ordinance?
I think it's more enforceable than what you have today.
Does that mean
that's what I said, but John, that's what I said. It's not an easy task to go and revise your zoning regulations on signs to be 100% content neutral. There's one municipality that's done it. I provided that example to you. Most municipalities don't like to do it that way because you like to identify signs and regulate signs based on the type of sign that it is and what the message is, whether it's a business sign, whether it's a real estate sign, whether it's a political sign. You typically don't get into somebody challenging you unless it's, the political signs is where it's a very controversial topic and people are they want to get their message across. So those tend to be the people that are going to complain about your regulations. The only other type of people the types of cases that I've seen where people really challenge in is, billboard signs. So your billboard regulations, I think are real. We had a validity challenge on that. And so we've made your billboard sign standards very, I think, ironclad. I'm comfortable with that. But, do I think that this ordinance, somebody couldn't say, well, you're still defining a sign based on what the message is? Yeah, you're right, we are. Do I think someone's going to challenge it? Because I think it's a reasonable restriction and it's a reasonable time frame. So I'm pretty comfortable that if you revise it the way this is, you're not going to have people taking you to court over these limitations.
Okay, that's what I wanted to confirm here. Also, section 52M is being deleted.
Yeah,
and that refers to an annual inspection requirement. And what's the thinking behind that?
The thinking behind that is that's not happening today. I asked your staff whether they're doing that, and they're not. So why have it in there? It specifically says building inspector shall inspect annually, or such other times as he's deemed necessary, each sign regulated by this. That would take a staff member quite a bit of time to go and inspect every sign that's put up into the township. It's
So
just
it's a
when I was looking at the whole ordinance, I realized that wasn't something you're doing.
Right, so it's a housekeeping item then, basically.
And
And
not
the
only that, one other thing, there are other provisions within this ordinance that already give you the ability to, if the zoning officer or the building code official sees that a sign is not being properly maintained or is going to fall down and creates a safety hazard, they have other powers to go ahead and mandate and send a zoning violation notice to the owner of the sign.
All right, I'm fine with this as long as, you know, our solicitor feels it's an enforceable and will be an enforceable ordinance, and I'm good with it.
Yeah, I think I reiterate what Kristen said, John, that, you know, I think we think it's enforceable, but, you know, can we ever guarantee that somebody's not going to challenge anything? No, but
Well,
I think we're pretty confident in it.
That's not always can be the case, right? I mean, everybody can sue anybody for anything.
Okay, other board comments or questions for Kristen? Do we have a motion to adopt the changes to the ordinance?
So you can't, Sean, because it's a zoning amendment, we have to send it to your planning commission, and to send it to the county commission.
Thank you.
And
I was about to say that I'll make the motion to advertise the ordinance. Is that what we need?
We actually need to send it, we would need your authorization to send it off to your planning and county planning. And then I would suggest that we wait to see what their comments are. Likely that you could hold your hearing in the March meeting.
Okay, we don't need a motion to do that, though.
No, just direction from the board to say for us to handle in that manner.
Yep.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
I think you have the board's direction to do that. Thanks, Kristen.
Okay.
Okay, returning to the agenda and what's left to go. It's now 10:09. We have approval of the treasurer's report that we should get to. We have, that's really it, other than allowing for public comment at the end of the meeting. The other 3 or 4 items that are left, does anyone feel the need that they need to be addressed tonight, or can they be deferred to a future meeting?
I do feel the need that they need to be addressed tonight, at least not in item 12. I think we can table that, but we have members of the Sustainability Committee that have been on the call for hours so that we can discuss the community garden. I really would like to discuss that. It can take 5 minutes.
Rest of the board okay with that?
Yeah, go.
Go ahead then, Ashley.
I'm not.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Hughes opposed. Do we have 3? We've got 3 in support, so go ahead, Ashley.
Go for it.
So as you can see, the Sustainability Committee has been in discussions about a proposed community garden. Stands, West Goshen Township, I don't believe has a community garden. This would be a site where could freely use a garden plot to grow and harvest their own food. We have Melanie Vile, who is the chair of the Sustainability Committee, on the line. She has graciously offered to provide not only her own volunteer time to maintain the garden, but volunteer time of her students at Westchester University. She's a professor there. So really what we're talking about is selecting a site. We would be basically using the funds allocated to us in this year's budget to get started. We'd like to just select a site. We'd be happy to work with Parks and Rec. I know that they've probably had their sites on doing something like this before, but it's really something that I think, especially this year, could be really beneficial for the community. We have a lot new members, like the new volunteers for the Sustainability Committee, that could start working on this. We have a new elementary school going in. One of the site considerations could actually be right next to Greystone Elementary, so that they could use it for classes, and the community members that live in Greystone. So I just wanted to put this out there for the board's consideration. And if we can discuss possibly approving moving forward this and giving the Sustainability Committee the go-ahead to work with Parks to figure out how we might get started selecting a site and what we would need to do to get that all set up.
Actually, how big are you considering the size of it to be? What kind of scale is the ambition here?
So I think probably we'd be starting out, we haven't had the discussions within the committee, but in my head, it would be something like 600 to 650 square feet, which I think is a reasonable size. within one of the parks, we could talk about that. We'd obviously have to have access to some kind of irrigation system. And, you know, obviously adequate sunlight and access for pedestrians as well.
Is there any concern about it being, you know, in a space that could become vandalized or, you know, an attraction for folks we don't want to be in our community garden, for want of a better phrase?
Well, you saw how they trashed the skate park. I don't think you can keep people out of, you know, from doing horrifying things, you know, who trashes a community garden? The worst of us, maybe? Yeah, anything's possible, but I'm not really thinking that that would be an issue.
Very good. Other board thoughts, support for Ashley's direction?
Well, yeah, support it. Can I suggest that maybe the Sustainability Advisory Committee could get together with the parks folks and come up with a plan that we could be presented to the board, either at the next board workshop meeting or at the next regular board meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're still talking about this, and we definitely plan to, you know, the parks have to be involved, right? They have all the equipment, so we're going to need some assistance in that area, and they, you know, need to kind of help us with where the site would be located.
Well, let's come up with a definitive idea, a definitive plan, and then we can go for it.
Great. So we'll have to just draw it out, pick a site, work with parks to do that. And Melanie, I mean, she's going to be kind of leading the charge with me on this, I think. Did you have any thoughts you wanted to add?
No, just that I'm really excited about this initiative, and I've had a lot of experience with community gardens from the multiple universities and also different organizations that I've worked with. I have a lot of experience with community gardens, and I think it'd be a wonderful asset to West Goshen. And if you guys think that's a great thing, I would love to add my experience and expertise to help that along. I think it's a wonderful asset for every community. So thank you, Ashley, for suggesting that.
Well, I think I hear you have board support in general to come up with a specific plan that we can chew on and hopefully approve for you.
Okay, we'll move forward then with coming up with some sort of plan with parks.
Very good. Thank you.
So,
Sean, just a quick update. I'm looking at the chat. It looks like Chris Paley's tried to reach out for a comment. I don't know if he's still on.
No, Chris left the call about 10 minutes ago.
Looks like he left.
Okay. Very
he
good.
reached out earlier, maybe, unless he's, yeah, he reached out earlier when he did make a comment. So maybe that's what you saw, Robin.
Yeah, there just were two comments from him again, so I wasn't sure.
Okay. All right, so checking in with the board here, we have agenda item number 12, discussion of chain of command reporting for the chief of police, and agenda item number 14, presentation discussion of commemorative naming program for township parks and facilities. My suggestion is that we postpone those to a later date. Do I have board agreement?
yeah, I support that. It's fine.
I support it too.
Yeah.
Agenda item number 15 then, approval of the Board of Supervisors meeting minutes of December 15th, January the 4th, and January the 6th. Are we in a position to be able to approve those tonight, or do we have board members with lots of comments that would rather wait till a different meeting?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
I like to
Okay, we have a motion from Robin and a second from John. Are there any board comments or updates to make to the minutes? I believe when I was talking with Derek earlier today, we have one outstanding item. Derek, what was it again?
Where's that?
It was, there was not a vote on the appointment to Robin, for Robin being on the COG, official COG representative. There was a second, there's a motion and a second, but there was never a vote. So just
on the meeting minutes for January the 4th on the final page at the very top.
Yeah, I watched the video a few times and I'm surprised I didn't catch it or nobody caught it that night, but there was a motion. It's escaping me right now who made the motion in the second, but there was a motion in a second. And there was not a final vote for the full board.
Okay, so let me try and make that happen again. So I make the motion to have Robin represent West Goshen at the Westchester Area Council of Governments for 2021. Do I
And
have
I'll
a
second
second?
that. Yeah, I got a second.
Seconded. Is there any board comment or public comment? Hearing none, let's take a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Hugh?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean? Aye. Passed 5-0. The only correction I had was on the previous page on the meeting minutes for January the 4th. Ms. Swart asked if it should be emergency operations plan could be put online for residents. It was written as resolution. So if we just update that, Derek, thank you. So I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Is there any other adjustments needed to be made before we vote?
Yeah, I'd like to make one more adjustment. On the December 15th minute meetings, I'd like to add there in the supervisor announcements under Mr. Hellman and so forth, conducting tabletop and field exercises. Add field exercises to the minutes there as well. Did you get that, Derek?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, any board comments or public comment on this motion?
I guess I still have a question about the EOP. I thought that there was information in there that was not meant to be publicly disclosed. I read through the documents that were sent. So can someone help me clarify?
Well, we're not posting it. We're not disclosing it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what I thought you said, that Ms. Swart had requested
She
that.
asked, but the board did not approve it. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks for the clarification, Robin. So if we're ready now, we'll take the vote to approve these meeting minutes. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Hugh?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean? Aye. Agenda item number 16, approval of the Treasurer's Report dated December the 31st for the General Fund, the Sewer Revenue Fund, the Waste and Recycling Fund, and the Capital Reserve Fund, and the bills to be paid from these funds. Do I have a motion for that?
I'll make the motion.
I'll make the motion that they be paid.
I think Ashley was first.
Sorry, Hugh, I jumped ahead.
Oh, Robin was first. Hugh, do you want to be the second?
That's first. I thought I had her by half a second.
You're gonna adjourn the meeting as you always do. So let me have this one.
So are there any board questions or comments on the fund balances or the bills paid? Are there any public comments on the balances or the bills to be paid?
Hi. Yes, it's Margie.
Go ahead, Margie.
Just a quick follow-up on the email I sent to you today. Were we aware of the large invoices that were going to come in from Carol when the budgeting was done for next year for engineering line item?
Yes, all those figures are worked into the budget projections for the end of the year budget.
Okay,
Actually, I think we did discuss Carroll Engineering being late with their invoicing when we talked about a couple of the projects specifically, like the Boot Road restriping and traffic light upgrade and a couple of the other projects that they've worked on, one of which was the Knollwood Drive project. They were late with billing on that.
The Boot Road project, is that going to be shared with East Goshen? Is that just the striping that's shared with them, or are they kicking in with the light as well?
The construction will be shared 50-50.
Okay, so part of that 40,000 for Carroll Engineering, half of that will be paid by East Goshen?
No, East Goshen's paying for half of the construction.
But we're paying for the design, Margie.
Correct.
Okay. All right, I forget what my other questions were. That's fine, thank you.
Are there any other public comment? Hearing none, move to a vote. Ashley?
I'm sorry, what are we voting for? To adjourn?
To approve the treasurer's report and the bills to be paid.
Yes, aye.
John?
Aye.
Hugh?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean? Aye. Final agenda item, public comment for any items not covered tonight.
Hi, it's Margie. May I go?
Go ahead.
Yes, I couldn't find my microphone. It gets buried in my windows. I did want to make a comment specifically about requesting an RFP for HRG. When they came on board 6 years ago, a RFP wasn't sent out to engage them at that time. And I am really impressed with that firm as well, but it's just a standard best practice. And I hope this board would engage in best practices and send it out for quotes. I know the sewer authority did a really good job and it was really efficient and effective. And they were able to get their quotes in a very short amount of time. And I mean, they're good, but they're very expensive. And engineers are engineers. I don't know how you cannot read plans. You know, I feel like another engineering firm might focus on doing the actual work instead of implementing a stormwater fee. And I feel like HRG's focus is more on getting that fee implemented and the work secondary. So those are my comments on that. Thank you.
Just to respond, Margie, that there is two pieces of work here. One is the engineering assessment of the data that's been collected on the stormwater system. So this is about consulting engineering service related to the interpretation of that information and the understanding of what prioritization of work needs to be done to remediate it. And that is what we were talking about tonight with the quote that Rick had obtained and was put in the budget. There's a separate budget item that is solely around how to determine the ongoing costs of both being permit compliant with our stormwater permit and the ability to fund projects associated with stormwater in general. We have a budget number that we've included for that, but they are two separate items. And we were discussing the former tonight. Any other public comments?
I
Make
would
a
like to
motion to adjourn. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I know
Ashley,
it's
you didn't beat Hugh, did you?
No, Melanie.
Melanie's
Melanie.
about to.
I know. I'm sorry. This will be very short. I just,
Go ahead.
speaking as a resident of West Goshen Township and also part of the West Goshen Committee, I'm very committed to sustainability, and I just want to return Ashley's comment regarding zoning of the Quality Inn. And again, I just want to make this very brief, but typically sustainability is defined as 3 pillars, and those 3 pillars are economic viability, environmental protection, and also social equality. And that last pillar often kind of gets lost. And so I just want to champion what Ashley said about potentially, thinking about what this Quality Inn could become and, turning it into affordable housing is something that we should think about, because there are, and no offense to those folks who have, come up with these beautiful plans for a beautiful renovation of that space, but we do need to, if we are a township committed to sustainability, and I think we are, given that we have, formed a newly formed the Sustainability Advisory Council, I just think it's something that we should think about. And that's really all I wanted to say, which is leave that last little thought bubble there, because it is something, if we are going to achieve sustainability, we need that 3rd pillar, which is social equality. And that's the one that gets lost behind the most. So.
Well, thank you for your comments, Melanie. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Melanie.
So I'm going to ask, is there any more public comment? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I will make the motion to adjourn.
Do you have a second? I'll second
It's
it.
time for me to go to sleep. Everyone in my family's asleep already. I'm gonna have to sneak into the bedroom.
We'll be quiet, then we can all
Yes,
get
I'm
to
gonna
bed.
be okay. I'm gonna be the second.
Okay, Robin's the second. You got that, Derek? All right. All in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Patience, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Good,
right,
good meeting.
There you
Thank you,
go.
Sean and Ashley.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.